Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, it's a trio with Ostic from Northern India and the lovely producer Jordan. Hey guys.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So it's going to be another long presentation. The first half is devoted to covering chapter 21 of the Golden Bough, Tabooed Things, which is broken up in, I believe, into, is it 11 subsections? I'll have to check my notes. And I just finished reviewing the back half, so I'm going to be kind of reminding myself as we go here what those sections are all about. I think I should say a little bit about some of the alchemical symbolism that we're going to talk about towards the end of this podcast, in case anyone wants to stick around, and to whet the appetite of the so interested Ostic, who asked me just before we got on here, what are we doing today? So I wanted to get in this habit of looking at the Apollo mission landing spots. Last time, I think we had a very fruitful conversation about the Sea of Tranquility and the craters that bounded the Eagle lander. This time, we'll be looking at Apollo 12. The lander for Apollo 12 was the Intrepid, and the command module was the Yankee Clipper. And so we're going to have a lot to say about that, including the different topological features that are on those traverse maps. All of this led to some literal rabbit trails. We have talked about the white rabbit as being emblematic of the trickster figure, and we get that from Carl Jung, we get that from Paul Rodin, we get this from a variety of other thinkers. But what I did not expect is that there is a close relationship between the white rabbit and Sherlock Holmes. And when you make this connection, you start to realize that really Sherlock Holmes populates like a lot of outer space programs, features, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it'll be a worthwhile endeavor to look at that alchemical symbolism. And this also, every week, I'm trying to challenge myself to do another layer of my evolving theory about how the history as it is presented and that which is occulted, what I guess we're talking about in conspiracy culture, these are light and dark sides of like the same thing. And that ultimately it's not just about going deeper down into the depths and where these things are going, but ultimately they seem to be functioning in sort of a Hegelian dialectical tension to give birth to some sort of synthesis. And I'm trying to understand this from a Jungian perspective as well. And I think what I want to do towards the end is talk about how to look at this synthesis from the perspective of the individual, from the perspective of the world as a collective dream, and also the panentheistic understanding of the Jungian God, as is portrayed with the Unus Mundus in his works on synchronicity, but perhaps also in Answer to Job. So that's some of the discussion we'll have towards the end. So Osik, that's what we're going to be doing today. Do you think this will be interesting enough for you?
What? Why do you say it like that? I'm always interested.
I know you are, but you have such a high standard. I want to make sure I fulfill it each time. I was a little bit self-conscious last time. I felt like I didn't have as much good decoding juice to the last podcast, and I think you were left pretty mystified by it all. So I do this all throughout the week, and then I deposit it. I do this big like autistic info dump on you guys, and to me, I'm like, yeah, I've been dealing with this for a week, but for you guys, I think it kind of blows you away a little bit more hearing it all concretized like that.
Yeah, it's so much all at once. So it's like it's really like our own personal Stargate sequence of 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's like David Bowen going into space and everything. No,
Yeah,
I really like
it's
that.
good. All right, so let's see if I could jog my memory and get into this tabooed things slide. Jordan, do you have anything you want to say before we get started?
Let's do it. Let's follow the white rabbit.
All right. So let's go to slide 401. And the first section of chapter 21 is just it's a little discourse on the meaning of taboo. And I usually I've talked to Ostic about this, like things get really repetitive so that I've indexed them into a bunch of different charts. Maybe we can talk about one or two examples from each. You can screenshot these, but I couldn't really find the appropriate image that I wanted to represent what Frazer was talking about in this section. So I turned to my new favorite LLM that is not hallucinating quotes on me, ChatGPT for this. And I'm just going to read the following, and we're going to think about it a little bit. In primitive societies, ceremonial purity rules for divine kings, chiefs, priests, homicides, mourners, women in childbed, girls at puberty, hunters, and fishers are similar, reflecting a shared perception of spiritual danger rather than moral distinctions like holiness or pollution. To the savage, these individuals are both dangerous and endangered due to an undifferentiated spiritual or ghostly force, which imagination makes as real and deadly as physical threats. The purpose of taboos is to seclude these individuals, preventing the spiritual danger from affecting them or spreading to others. These taboos function like electrical insulators, preserving the charged spiritual force and avoiding harm through contact with the external world. The reality of this danger lies in the power of imagination, capable of killing as surely as poison. So last time we talked a lot about voodoo death, and we talked about what was do you guys recall what the technical name was for voodoo death? Hypogenic? Was it hypogenic death? I think that's what it was called.
That sounds right. You
Yeah.
were also talking about like nocebo.
Yes, exactly. We'll call it nocebo. And we were thinking about its relation to the pandemic that happened in 2020. And a lot of this involves conceptualizing the leader. Oh, it was psychogenic. It was psychogenic death. That was the name of what we were talking about, and how a lot of these imaginative taboos actually result in physical illness and death in certain individuals. And we've been playing around with this concept about heavy is the head that wears the crown in terms of the leaders of these societies. They have all these different taboos so that they're not infected by psychic force, but also so that they don't the power of whatever's coursing through them doesn't contaminate or kill the individuals that are around them. So the taboos kind of focus to keep them secluded, sectioned off, and that's why I had this little image of this of this king in a force field who is both protecting the people in the community and himself from contamination. So we're going to look at some of those sources of contamination that especially the kings, but really everyone is not allowed to engage with. So we can go to the next slide in the next section unless someone has something to say here. So the first section has to do with the
Ostic raised his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you, Ostic.
I mean, okay. What I wanted to say was the whole idea of a body politic. You know,
Ooh, go
many.
on.
I mean, yeah. I mean, a lot of communist theories they talk about it, like in the sense of there's a whole system that this whole society of ours can be called represented as a body in itself. So I think there's this idea of wanting to, I mean, if you're kept in a society, you are constantly bombarded with these taboos. These taboos, they enforce or they enable you to view your world as more meaningful than it actually is. I mean, it's like if you're a part of a culture, all these taboos and all these rules, they make you more inclined towards participating in it and like believing in their myths. It's like, I'm not saying anything profound, I'm saying like what's actually happening. I mean, because these taboos, they might not be real, they might be real, but they have the profound effect on our psyches. So it's basically mind control with extra steps or something like that. So
That's
I'm
I
thinking about
love
it.
you saying, yeah, I love you saying body politic because that definitely conjures up more helpful imagery and really contextualizes a lot of this when we talk about what's going on in our own contemporary situation. I didn't have a lot of time to think about what's going on in the modern world with all these different taboos, but I'm sure we could sit here all day and like generate a bunch of nonsensical taboos that don't really comport um, with materialistic science as we understand it in modernity. But yeah, I think that's fantastic, especially when you start to talk about like the king as being like the head of that body politic, right? And what's downstream from whatever contaminates the head could contaminate the other extremities, et cetera, et cetera. So I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. So the first set of taboos we're looking at have to do with the taboo connected with iron. So that was, I had never heard about that. So a lot of primitive societies have this aversion to iron, which Frazer speculates that the aversion to iron might be just due to its utter novelty by comparison. It's relatively new on the scene, and that these cultural taboos that were surrounding iron really reflect the change in the society and how they're just not comfortable with that type of change. And what we see in a lot of these air quotes primitive societies is that the kings are really to have nothing to do with iron. Examples that he has here are the Spartan, Tahitian, Siamese, and Cambodian kings, where such contact could result in death or required royal permission, as seen in an 1874 incident where a European aided an injured Cambodian king. In Korea, touching the king made the touch spot sacred, requiring a lifelong visible mark. And iron was forbidden from touching the king's body, leading to untreated medical conditions like a fatal tumor in 1800. And it goes, they wouldn't even, these kings and whatnot wouldn't even be able to shave with like an iron razor. I believe Frazer even gives an example, one that I thought was most curious. If we go to slide 403, maybe, or maybe it was 404. I'm skipping a bunch of them here. But if we go to 404, what I thought was interesting is that in Poland, iron plowshares were generally avoided because they believed that the iron was associated with bad harvests. So I looked into that a little bit, and the some of the criticism that I found online about what Frazer said about the Polak, people were like, "Oh, this is like a Polak joke. You're saying we were too stupid to use iron because we actually think it causes the crops to not grow or something." Um, the criticism is that Frazer wasn't accurately depicting what was going on in those societies. What he was doing is taking like a handful of anecdotes and generalizing about what all these cultures actually believe. So that's one of the criticisms about what he had to say about Poland. Because I thought like, oh, maybe there's something in Poland today where they won't use iron plows because of this taboo. But there's not like a great discussion. I don't recall, unless either of you do. I don't recall like a really granular discussion about why people find iron to be so taboo laden or so terrible outside of the association that this is a disruptive new invention that we don't want any part of.
I mean, what were they making their weapons out of, if not iron? Like, didn't they have the armies, or were they making them from bronze or other things? I'm not sure. Maybe it could be
I
that iron catches rust. It can cause diseases like maybe tetanus and everything.
ooh maybe let's just so the Iron Age occurred roughly between 1200 BCE and 550 BCE, and it followed the Bronze Age. I'm not some great expert on all this, and I couldn't tell you like if it all happened, which is like super interesting, right? Like, is this all occurring like everywhere at the same time, right? Like, how are the ideas being transmitted? What this gets into the collective unconscious. Like, why are synchronistic discoveries happening as well? Could it have something to do with an observation about tetanus? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think Frazer really knows. But I mean, at least in these particular, with the Polish example, it has nothing to do with people getting sick and dying from it. It has everything to do with them. Like, hey, we did things a certain way for X amount of years. We bring the iron along, and shortly thereafter, we have drought. So we're not going to do this anymore because clearly the gods don't
Hmm.
like this.
Yeah, this could be this could be some local cultural thing. I'm sorry about the sound. Maybe it's coming from the back.
I
Of
think you're just
firecrackers
tapping
are
on your
going on.
desk. Yeah.
No, 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 no. I'm not doing anything. Okay. Other thing is that with the kings, them not like the kings not responding positively to iron thing. It could be a class thing, maybe, because some lower class soldiers might be handling iron swords and everything. So it could be related to that.
Totally. I mean,
So
that's the
like,
thing, right?
you-
Like all these different examples probably have way more complicated explanations than what Frazer is giving. Like he's not sitting there and doing like ethnological like reports on every single society that he's interacting with. He's kind of making an observation and doing some theorizing, but the intimate details, the psychological mechanisms are, there's a lot that leaves to be desired there in terms of field work, and it's a lot to ask of him too, right? It's a lot to ask of him to go and do that for everything, because he wouldn't have been able to write this set of books. I think what we could say is the Golden Bough sets up individuals to go deeper and to perhaps correct and annotate what he's done.
yeah, I agree with that. There's a whole
So
field of study that was opened up called anthropology, I think,
yeah,
after his
for sure.
work. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
it's a good strategy to make like these. If you're a pioneer, you make all these errors, and then there's a whole cadre of people making their careers out of correcting your errors.
Yeah, they just clean up after you. Jordan, do you have anything to say about this section before moving to the next one?
Um, this doesn't answer the why, but I always find it interesting to see what different astrological traditions associate with different things, and metals are one of those categories. I'm sure
That's
we could look deeper
right.
into alchemy,
Yes, you
uh,
could.
what iron is associated with specifically. In astrology, it's associated with Mars, which isn't super
That's
surprising. As Ostic
yeah.
pointed out, it was commonly used to make weapons. Of course, weapons were made out of other metals as well, but iron would be super prevalent, and part
That
of why
would
we
be
call it the Iron Age. In contrast, bronze is associated with Mercury, which is interesting to me. So they have different qualities, and
I'm
it's
so
not
glad.
causal, it's
Yeah.
a causal, right? We're just looking at what are all the different data points throughout the realm, and what synchronicities, what energies, what similarities, what energetic signatures do these things have in common.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'm sure there is someone who's done like an astrological interpretation of the different metallurgic
Mhm,
ages based on that understanding.
totally.
I've never looked into it, but I'm sure someone has. Like, what was going on in Mars during that time period of the Iron Age? Like, I don't know, probably a lot of crazy stuff.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
the Oh, go ahead.
a small bit of trivia. So a lot of scientists or cosmologists, they talk about iron being the evidence that iron is the reason why we're all here. They argue that, and the way they argue that is that whenever a star it actually is about to explode or going to, if you have heard about supernovas and everything. So as soon as it formulates iron in its core, it explodes. So like, if it was, iron is the evidence that we are stardust. You talk about it, like, because
Mhm.
yeah, so it's like maybe it's connected to them as well in some way. Like iron is the very, like, important metal element to these cosmologists. They tout
Yeah,
it as the proof of our existence and that we come from stars.
that's an interesting point. I'll have to look deeper
Mhm.
into that. All right, next section.
Sure.
Okay. So what's next here? Okay. Now, so it's a natural progression to talk about the sharpness of weapons being tabooed after talking about iron. Um, and this had a lot to do. This makes sense compared to some of the previous installments that we've done. A lot of this has to do with spirits. So, for instance, among the Soti of Burma, no weapons or cutting instruments are allowed in the priestly king's house, likely to protect his divine spirit from harm, a practice linked to broader taboos against sharp objects when spirits are near. And these customs reflect a widespread fear of wounding spiritual entities. such as like with the Burmese, they have the Burmese king's taboo is a safeguard against the sacred spirit. So I think the idea, if I can recall correctly, we can look at some more examples, but I think the idea is, and we looked at this with like the manslayers last time, is that the thing that oftentimes you have killed, whether it be like an animal or another soldier or another person or something like that in battle, like their spirit sticks around for whatever period of time they've determined, 3 days, a week, 2 years. I'm not exactly sure how they come up with all the different things, but I think there's something about, okay, you've killed this thing once already in like the physical plane. You don't want to like injure it again in the spiritual plane, because then that's going to come back and wreak havoc for you whatever your participation is in the spiritual plane. Like we have here the Eskimo of the Bering Strait. So they had no sharp pointed instruments for 3 days post death, 4 days post whale kill, no loud noises. They didn't want to like injure the shade of the whale, I guess. They didn't want to hurt the ghosts that would like potentially come back and haunt them. That's just one example.
I mean, one point, if we're talking about spirits being caught up in weapons, so if you've read the plays of William Shakespeare, like Macbeth and Assassination of Julius Caesar, like in Macbeth, he literally hallucinates a weapon to, when he is about to kill the king, Macbeth. So it's like that weapon is supposed to be a talisman of sort. Like it conjures up in his imagination, and it guides him towards the chamber of the king. So I'm just talking about like spirits, and then he's like, I cannot wash this blood, like all the seas of the world cannot wash this blood from my hands, because later on he talks about the blood of the king being sacred, and it's supposed to carry one's soul. And like some tribes, they would not drink blood because they think that blood is like the soul of the person. So
Right.
yeah, I'm thinking about that. Yeah, in
That's the very
Julius
next
Caesar.
section. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
very next section is blood tabooed. So we'll get to that. And I want you, and let's extrapolate on what you just said. Jordan, did you have something to say about these sharp weapons?
Very Martian as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Not to mention, as we might as well go to the next slide.
Mhm.
Not to mention, isn't there, I mean, keeping with this iron Mars connection, there's a bunch of iron in the blood, right? That's why the blood is red, right?
Right.
So this may be all sort of mixed together in ways that we haven't really considered. So section 4 is, as Ostick mentioned, is about these taboos regarding blood. And this taboo stems from the widespread belief that blood harbors the animal's or person's soul, like Ostick said, making tabooed individuals especially vulnerable to spiritual harm. These restrictions, strictly enforced in critical situations, are also generally observed as a common rule to prevent the soul and blood from entering or harming the body. Right. So I think there's some element of like possession that's going on here. Like you mentioned, like people not wanting to like drink the blood or whatever. Like, so
Mhm.
if that entity's spirit is like still in the blood, hasn't done this complete separation from the body, like you don't want to have you don't want to have that like get inside of you. What's interesting, we see a little bit of this potentially verified in modern medicine, perhaps only anecdotally, but I've encountered enough stories with this idea that like the personality kind of follows a transplanted organ. Like individuals who will get like a new heart
Mhm.
or a new kidney or something like that will start having like cravings or have some personality shifts. I go verify this. I'm sure like Google Gemini will say, "Oh no, that's total hocus pocus." But there are a lot of people out there who claim that this happens, and that raises. I wonder, is it kind of like going back around, and is it like verifying this metaphysical framework in some way, where they actually believe it's not the pineal gland where the soul is; it's throughout the entire body, and it's in the blood.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead, Austin.
I mean, since you're talking about these maybe it's something somewhat related to the phantom limb syndrome that you discussed
Yes.
earlier. Maybe, yeah. So what I'm thinking about, like Merleau-Ponty, he creates an image of a gecko growing back its arm after it has been cut. So he says that why would the arm grow exactly in that way, like where his like it could grow in any haphazard way, but it grows exactly as it's supposed to be, you know. So he says that there's body is following an intelligent design. It's not like I was saying that you talked about the heart. It integrates the personality of the previous person as well if you get a transplanted heart or transplanted organ. So I'm thinking about, like, people talk about the memories specifically, stored inside the brain. People don't know it, but people assume that's the case. But we we think about, when we see what actually happens, maybe in animals like geckos, when they lose an arm, they grow it back in the size. So Mole Ponty, he talks about that, why would the arm grow exactly in that particular order? So there must have been a preordained order where the body is moving towards. So I'm thinking about, if
Yes.
you're going to replace the organ, so what's going to happen, like the body is going to move towards it. So there's going to be a symbiotic relationship between the previous person and the deceased person and that organ in particular, because not it's not the brain is always intervening everywhere. Brain is a valve. It flows, it stops and like creates flows of information. But the body itself is intelligent. So it's pretty practical, I think, that you'll have some sort of an essence of that previous person, because to integrate with the body, and there's going to be some kind of a mishmash a little bit. So that's what I think is happening there.
Yeah, that's a fantastic observation. I think Merleau-Ponty is probably drawing on some of I think Kant kind of introduced a lot of this thinking as well, when trying to understand how like all the parts of the organism like are connected to the I guess what we would call it the telos of the entity, right? He talks about this in regards to trees, but I imagine that reading Aristotle's De Anima would be helpful for understanding this as well. That's just a hunch, but it given what you've said about Merleau-Ponty, what we've talked about here with different types of transplantation, phantom limb syndrome, et cetera, it does seem right that this essence, this soul, is extending throughout the entire body, and it raises very interesting questions about. And I know Jordan will have interesting things to say about this. About if this is happening when we're doing transplants and things like that, what is happening when we have intimacy with people, right? Like what is happening in like relationships, and is there? Can we even talk about like essences becoming intertwined?
Sure. There's two or more layers that this can happen on. Michael Talbot's book, The Holographic Universe, gives a lot of examples, and the theory he lays out is that data is stored in the field, and the field influences the material reality.
Mm,
So that could be one mechanism, possibly, of what's going on with the body that regrows the limbs. Well, that data is stored in the field of the body collectively. It's stored in the field of the heart, of the brain, which both are known to be quite strong field emitters. So if you have transplants of organs, those organs have fields, those fields interact together, and then you have kind of a bigger field of the body holistically. And then you could even zoom out bigger. There's a field of the household, there's a field of the community, on and on and on, that make it up, like the body politic. There's another layer of this, which, depending on your perspective, might just be an emanation of what I stated already, or you could think about it as its own concept, but data being stored in water. There's many experiments trying to show to people how water can store memory. And so when you're talking about the fluids in the body or exchanging essences, as you put it so delicately, there is that element going on. So I think you have it kind of on a completely non physical level. And then possibly we have these physical manifestations of it in different layers, with the water itself being a huge part of it.
Yeah, those are excellent insights. She's turned me on to Michael Talbot, and he seems, I don't know if you've had a chance to interact with his material, but he seems like he was a really profound thinker onto something. But tragically, he died prematurely.
Hmm.
So I think he one of my favorite programs on YouTube is a New Thinking Aloud with Jeffrey Mishlove, and I believe there's kind of a classic interview that he does with Michael Talbot on that. So maybe that's be required viewing for a little group chat. I feel like I watched it before though, but it could refresh my memory.
Hmm.
We should progress to the next slide to talk a little bit about a little bit of a permutation here in the blood, because there's a little bit of a difference when it's applied to royal blood. And if we go to slide 407, Jordan, in many primitive societies, royal blood is considered sacred and must not be shed on the ground to avoid spiritual contamination. So when a king or royal family member faces execution, special methods are used to prevent blood from touching the earth. I don't know why they would. I mean, it's mystifying to me why they would execute their royal monarchs if that's all. It seems there seems to be a paradigmatic like inconsistency there. If they have like this divine energy that's going through them, yet they can kill their kings. I have some questions about that. But the reluctance to spill royal blood reflects a broader primitive aversion to shedding blood or letting it touch the ground, which is driven by the fear of spiritual contamination or sorcery. The reluctance to shed blood on the ground stems from the belief that blood contains the soul, as we talked about earlier, making any ground it touches taboo or sacred. This taboo against spilling tribal blood applies especially stringently to chiefs and kings, persisting longer than for commoners. So they've got that psychic essence more strongly than the regular person. So like these, wherever the king's blood is, it becomes sacred ground, but also we don't want to let the blood touch the ground because then maybe the ground will be cursed. No, I guess it's not really so much to say there's a paradigmatic inconsistency. It becomes a bit of a paradigmatic inconsistency when we hover above all the different examples. We can look at a couple here. They like in Siam around 1688, a rebellious generalissimo executed the king by pounding him in an iron cauldron with wooden pestles to avoid spilling his divine blood. So and then in Burma and among Tartars, similar bloodless execution methods like smothering are reserved for royal victims to uphold a taboo against contaminating sacred blood with the earth. So I'm a little bit confused. Like, is it about contaminating the sacred blood with the dirty earth or contaminating the earth with like vengeful sacred blood? I'm a little bit confused about that. I'm not really sure like all this needs to make sense right now, but it's a thing. Okay. And it's interesting how the application of it is less stringent the further you are away from being the monarch.
I mean, it's like they don't want to touch grass, basically, these kings. They want to stay up the rest because it's basically about status and like they know everyone has blood. So how do they differentiate themselves from others? Oh, our blood is sacred, so you have to treat it differently than someone else. So they build these traditions around people, and especially with kings, they I mean, if I'm talking about Europeans, so there's a famous example of the Habsburgs. So what happened with them? They had these blood diseases. The kings of England, they still have these. You know, I don't know if you know that because they
Oh
will
yeah,
keep bleeding if you cut them up. So it's
they're
like they have blood disease.
hemophiliacs.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
They have hemophilia, right? Isn't that what that's
Yeah,
called?
yeah, 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 yeah. Hemophilia. So it's like, I mean, with blood and everything, because it's a it's a demarcator of to differentiate themselves from other people. So and then it ties into their property rights, who will inherit what. So they want to keep everything into the family. They're very they have their own little world of conspiracies within them, the small group. So I think that's what's happening, and that is what creates these taboos, because I think there's advisors, these all these bells and whistles around them, all these people who look after them, they create these taboos, and then it's like a whole machine. Like if you call a machine of, it's a very well functioning machine to uphold its own delusions, and a hall of mirrors. You cannot escape it. Uh, if you're a king, if you're all you see is your own like world, small world that you've built for yourself, and your own private religion and your own private culture, so you lose touch with the reality of things after a while.
That's a fantastic point. I hadn't even really thought about how this would apply in the aristocratic circles that you were talking about, especially like the whole concept of blue bloods. So, yeah, awesome. Great insight. Great insight. Should we move
Let's
forward,
progress.
Jordan? Do you want to keep going with this?
Let's keep going. Well, there is a book somewhere, and I don't know how much I prescribe to it, but there's books that talk about different blood types with different diets
Oh
that persists
yeah,
into today. I
yeah.
I you know, some people swear by it, other people are like, um, less impressed. So I mean, truly, I know people very adamantly on both sides of that, but that would be, I think, another example. My dad always told me something about like having a good grade, like, you get A's and B's. He'd always make a joke about that with the blood
Mm,
type.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think there's still kind of some myths around like different bloodlines. I mean, how much do we talk about bloodlines in the conspiracy world and these families? Like you guys already mentioned, the blood. Is that like, do some people think that's literal? Is it metaphorical? Is it propaganda the way they talk about these bloodlines, like Ostick said, just to make people seem like they have a higher status? All the vampire stuff is super
Oh
interesting.
yeah,
There's a lot
yeah.
going on with the blood.
I was so interested in talking about Apollo 12 that I didn't think about any of this stuff until now.
That's okay.
So that's what you guys are here for, helping me translate it. All right, so let's talk about heads. All right, so the head thing is super interesting because it's going to get into hair and how we deal with hair. But let's talk about heads for a second. So many cultures regard the head as sacred due to beliefs that it houses a sensitive spirit. And that, that kind of makes sense, right? That we're, it seems like we do our thinking with our heads. Um, he uses the examples here of the Karens believe the soul spirit resides in the head, protecting against harmful passions, requiring careful attention to head attire to keep it content and strong. Among the Siamese, the Quan guardian spirit in the head is highly sensitive, necessitating elaborate ceremonies for haircutting to avoid injury or insult. In Cambodia, touching a person's head is a grave offense, and people avoid living under inhabited rooms or having objects above their heads, leading to single story houses and government respect for this taboo. And the Malays in Java prohibit anything or on or touching their heads, avoiding multi-story buildings and reacting violently to head contact, viewed it as a profound violation of the head's sanctity. So it's almost like they think that this sensitive spirit has something to do with the regulation of their actions to make sure that their passions don't get too inflamed. But that might be a bit of an oversimplification. Um, there's some more if we go. Well, that's the Let's go to if we go to 409. There's some more. Maybe this will help fill it out a little bit. I'll just pick up a couple here. In Polynesia, the head is considered highly sacred, with touching or passing over it viewed as a severe violation, as seen with the Marquesian chief Gadanewa, where such acts were sacrilege or unforgivable indignities. In Tonga and Tahiti, standing over or touching the king or queen's head could result in death, and a Tahitian infant's head was so taboo that touched objects became sacred and were isolated, with trees cut down if they brushed a child's head. So I'm not exactly sure what to say about this sensitive spirit, what its point was. It just seems that there's this universal belief that it's there, that it seems to um, needs extra protection. Maybe it needs extra protection so that it can do its job of emotional regulation. I'm not sure, but it's a thing. It's a thing. I don't understand the mechanism and what they think is happening there, and what how it's different from the soul that they think is in the blood, or if it's an emergent property of the soul that's in the blood. I don't even know if they have complex theories about this. It's just a thing. I don't know what you guys have to say.
I mean, with the infant thing, I can understand because an infant, this head is not fully formed. Those bones, they're isolated. So the maybe they're paranoid about that. So maybe that taboo actually originated from that. And with these things that people not taking, living in single story houses. So I think that's maybe they think about is like someone is above you, because people think about being controlled like puppets or something, or like this person is now above me, things like that. These are silly things from my opinion, but like we have these taboos as well. Like I'm not allowed to sit and eat with my back towards someone. So it's like if you sit and eat with the back towards someone, that person is supposed to be your enemy. You should always eat with the person facing him or her. So things like that. It's like you don't know about it, but like people are very strict about it. So it's like, yeah, it's going on and everything.
Jordan, did this catalyze any thoughts in you?
Not really like new ones. So we're kind of seeing the same motifs
Yeah.
over and over and over.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could say more, but like
We're just 45 minutes into this thing.
I know sniffing the fingers is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Okay.
I'm
Hair
not trying to
cutting is
dismiss
pretty
it.
good.
Yeah, I'm not saying like it's not interesting. I just don't know that I have more to add.
Hair cutting
Well,
is pretty interesting.
all
Hair
right.
cutting.
Well, let's get into that. Let's go to slide 410. In primitive societies, cutting hair is a delicate operation due to the head's sacredness, with risks of disturbing the head's spirit, which may retaliate, and the challenge of safely disposing of shorn locks to prevent magical harm. The savage believes a sympathetic connection persists between a person and their severed hair or nail clippings, making them vulnerable to injury or sorcery if mishandled. We've seen this idea before with food scraps, et cetera, et cetera. We got to dispose of them properly. We've got a couple of examples here. The Frankish kings who never cut their hair to maintain their throne. They face stricter precautions due to their heightened spiritual danger. The Haus of West Africa and Maasai rainmakers' hair is never cut, as it is seen as the god's abode or source of supernatural power, with cutting believed to cause death or loss of abilities. You even see this in the Bible. You see this with the story of Samson and Delilah. Like Delilah's trying to seduce him and find out the source of his otherworldly strength, and it turns out it's in his hair. And that's ultimately how he is subdued by it's interesting. It seems to be kind of a little bit of a Mandela effect associated with that story from the Old Testament. If I asked you guys, how was Samson subdued? How would you respond?
I don't remember.
Well, you know the story about it is Samson, right? It's Samson and Delilah.
It is Samson and Delilah. Yeah.
I thought
Do you
he
know?
fought a lion. Samson.
Oh, I'm sure he fought all sorts of things. He's kind of like the
Yeah.
biblical Hercules.
Uh-huh.
But so if his power was in his hair and Delilah was trying to seduce him, right. I think
I thought this was different. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes, she cut his hair. Yeah.
you'd think it would be cutting his hair.
Yeah.
Well, it was funny when I went back and I started reading the Bible, that's not how in the Bible he actually loses his hair. She goes through this whole thing where she is trying to determine where his weakness is, and he's like sleeping. She'll do something to him in his sleep, and then she'll be like, "Oh, the Romans are upon you," or whoever it was, and he'll like leap up, and she finally figures out that it's in his hair, or he tells her. I think that's what he does. He confides in her, and she like ties it like into like a loom, and he like gets up and it like rips it out. So it's not cut with like
Hmm.
shears. And I that seems very strange to me. I was under the impression she cut it while he was sleeping.
That's what I thought too.
Mm. No.
But clearly I'm not a scholar on this topic,
Oh,
so
I've just read the Bible. You know, it's not. Also, if we go to slide 411, there's this idea that in some cultures, uh, men vowing vengeance keep their hair unshorn until fulfilling the oath. So there's something about the hair being connected to their word, and they they won't cut it until that happens. But it is kind of interesting, right? Like whatever the sensitive spirit is in the head, they feel like it's connected to the hair that's coming out of their head, which raises all sorts of like one of the things that can happen is like baldness, right? If you violate some of these taboos. Um, and yeah, it 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 definitely raises very interesting questions about um, hair that I never really think about. I mean, I think there's some discussion like conspiracy communities, like about hair being like the antenna, like hair like somehow like puts you in contact with the divine. Have you heard this idea, Jordan? Jordan's got super long hair, so she's all now. You know what would be relevant to this conversation is Avatar. They have like their long hair. They like weave into like the natural matrix and the to Earth. It gives them like downloads. It's like organic internet.
Mhm. Yeah.
I
The
don't know.
advice I've been given is when meditating to have my hair down.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Was there any explanation of that advice?
The energy flow. Same
Ooh.
reason, like, ideally, you're not crossing your legs.
Yeah, that we're actually gonna be talking about. You're like, I know I read, but we're gonna be talking about that a little bit later on with knots.
Mhm.
Yeah. Are there
Yeah.
is there interesting hair stuff in India, Ostic, that's relevant to this?
I mean, here is the primary. Like here is the biggest thing I think with people. There's an entire industry that's dedicated for hair care and like promising men that use this shampoo, you'll not go bald. Things like that. So it's like it's a huge source of anxiety for people to lose their hair because hair represents individuality, like very strong, because hair is like a crown. If you do it right, it's like it adds to your personality 100 times. Because when I had long hair, I used to get like proposals. I used to get asked out by girls on date.
Whoa,
That changed
whoa.
everything for me. you know but like it's
I
like,
did not know
and
about
with,
this side of you.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I was
That's
even surprised myself. I was just growing it out because I was lazy, and then it started happening. Things like that. Because hair is very sacred to people, and it's a point of pride, especially for women. Women, they in India, I think they pride themselves in keeping their hair very long. Very
yeah,
religious women. They never cut it. Like they for 10, 20 years they'll keep growing it. My grandmother, she never cut her hair, so it's like down to her, almost as down to her knees right now. So things like that.
are
And
there any
it's
are
a
there any taboos associated with that you know of, or
yeah, yeah, yeah. The taboos are especially that whenever a family member dies, you have to, cut off your hair. A lot of people donate their hair. I think I'm sure you know that most of the wigs that are being made that people wear they come from India. So they
really?
come from people, yeah, they come from people donating their hair to the temple after their wishes have been fulfilled. So they promise, I'll give you my hair if you do this. And then they donate their hair. People donate their hair all the time. So it's like in India, that's a huge custom of sorts. And, there's I don't know, I'm not sure if you know about the biggest empire of India. There was in 500 BC, like around the time of the Buddha. So there was a huge battle when one priest was insulted by a king, and he said that I'll not tie my hair until I defeat you. and I'll bring you down, and I'll destroy your kingdom. So his hair itself, it became a point of pride and a contempt that drove him to actually dethrone that king and put one of his own students in charge. So it's like the origin story of like modern India. So it's like that. The hair
That's
is important.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy. I didn't know anything about that.
I mean, in
Yeah.
movies as well.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
just
you
one
think
thing,
about,
movies as well.
oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Just one point in movies and art as well, because people in painters, they take a lot of care when selecting what kind of hair a person should have. In symbolist paintings in the 18th century, you'll see a lot of red heads. People would have red hairs, people would have black hairs. Like there's distinctions between blondes and brunettes and things like that. So it's like it's a very integral part of the culture. And even in Stanley Kubrick movies, hair is a very important part of that,
That's
because
right.
yeah, if you see Nicole Kidman's hair, they're like, you talked about antennas, it's like they're the extension of her brain, as if the way they're shot, they're zigzagging strawberry blonde hair thing, and it's simultaneously beautiful. But the way he shoots the movies, it's like the hair itself is a part of the whole being. Like Lady Lyndon, her hair as well, things like that. It's just like, and
Well,
Jack Nicholson having a bald spot here, and then that
yeah.
other costume owner, he having a bald spot. It's like, I think about the bald spot being like they've been shot to the head and they don't have their brains anymore. And then in Full Metal Jacket, their individuality being stripped from them by shaving off their head in the beginning of the movie. So the way he shoots the film, it's like the hair is like their knowledge base of sorts. So it's like they're removing them. So it's like a part of a brainwash of sorts. In the beginning of the movie, when the barber is shaving all the hairs from and the privates, they're very sad about it. So things like that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to jump in and say, because you were doing hair, hair, hair. And I was like, oh, please say Full Metal Jacket. Please say Full Metal Jacket. Because that really does inform this whole thing, right? Like, if the idea is that there is this sensitive spirit in your crown that is like regulating emotional control, then the shearing of the hair it in military structures, right, in a way unleashes that violent passion that is going on within the mind. So presumably the reason why this is done from an operational perspective is like, to encourage group identity. Perhaps do not get your hair caught in machinery like your gun or a helicopter door or something like that, right? But there is this potential level to it that is possibly understood within bodies of psychological fighting literature, that ultimately that this shaving the head might ultimately unleash more of that warrior mentality. That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, I
Also,
mean,
this conversation got me thinking about attraction. There, and you mentioned how there's like so many people in India. Well, let me tell you, it's worldwide about like it's like the hair loss industry is like multi-billion dollar industry, and there seems to be no cure in sight. And a lot of it, I think, is animated by men not feeling like they're going to be perceived as attractive if they don't, like you mentioned, when you had your long locks, like you were irresistible. And I believe it. I believe it. I mean, but it raises an interesting question. I wonder if, like, on some primal level, women are responding to that. Jordan, what do you think? Let me put you on the spot. That somehow there's something gone wrong with the sensitive spirit in a man who is follically, there we go, follically challenged.
No comments.
No comment. I too used to have very long hair when I was a teenager, and now I clearly do not.
uh, you talked about soldiers being in Full Metal Jacket. I'm thinking about, when they have their appearance changed all of a sudden. So what would their psychology be like? So before the recruitment, they had hair, they had their past, and removing their hair is a sort of, cutting them off from their past. And whenever they look into the mirror, they see their new identity. Whenever they look to the side, they see another soldier with a similar haircut. So it's like a psychological mechanism. I'm talking about the movie itself.
Yeah.
How could they bond together, and how could they reassimilate into their new identity that has been crafted and essentially manufactured for them to grow into, and to, because in the movie we're never shown about anything about what the soldiers past was. Nothing, we know nothing about them. We just know them as like fresh babies. They're suddenly being shouted at by the drill
Yeah.
sergeant.
Yeah. 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 That's great. That's good. This has been productive. It's good. Should we go on to, yeah, we got the hair cutting taboos to look at. So let's just go to that 412. So when hair cutting is necessary in primitive societies, elaborate precautions are taken to mitigate the spiritual dangers associated with disturbing the sacred head. We get the idea. I mean, let's just I'll just give two here. In Fiji's Nomosi, the chief consumed a human victim chosen by a specific clan as a sacrificial feast to avert evil after a haircut. So they like practice cannibalism after getting a haircut because it was that big of a deal. Like, that's crazy. Among the Maoris, haircutting involves spells to consecrate the obsidian knife and avert natural disasters like thunder, with the person whose hair was cut becoming tabooed and required feeding by others to avoid self-touch. The haircutter also becomes tabooed, unable to touch food or work till the next day, when their hands are purified by rubbing with potato or fern root cooked on a sacred fire, which is then eaten by a female family head to lift the taboo. I mean, these are just some examples. We've talked about it. Yeah, and then we got, if we want to go on to, let's just go to 413. This is about the disposal. In primitive societies, cut hair and nails are dangerous due to a believed sympathetic connection with their owner, making them vulnerable to sorcery if mishandled. The widespread superstition holds that harm to these severed parts can afflict the person. These practices are rooted in contagious magic, and they reflect the universal fear that bodily remnants can be used by sorcerers to harm or kill their original owner. And just like we can look at if we go back to the Marquesan practices, where sorcerers buried hair or spittle in a knotted bag to cause a 20-day wasting sickness, which was reversible by unearthing the items. That's one thing that sorcerers could do. The Maori, again, similarly used hair, nails, spittle, or clothing, chanting curses and burying them to make the victim waste away as the object decayed. So those are a couple examples of that. And I guess we could go to 414. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot here, but I wanted to kind of just go through this. We've got section 8, which is disposal of cut hair and nails. Cut or combed out hair is also thought to influence weather, causing rain, hail, thunder, or lightning. To protect cut hair and nails from injury or sorcery, they must be carefully disposed of in safe, sacred places to prevent magical harm via contagious magic. So, we've got the Husels of the Carpathians. And in Germany, it is believed that if mice or birds use a person's cut hair for nests, the person will suffer headaches or even idiocy, with similar beliefs once held in West Sussex about head eruptions. We can go on and on. Yeah. So they just got to make sure to get rid of them. The flamen dialysis hair and nails were buried under a lucky tree, and Vestal Virgin tresses were hung on an ancient lotus tree to prevent misuse by sorcerers. So, good stuff. I'm talking a lot here. We've got a continuation of this idea on page 415, and then I'll pause for some commentary from Osik and Jordan. In many cultures, clipped hair and nails are hidden in secret places, not always temples or cemeteries, to protect them from sorcery due to their sympathetic connection to the owner. In some cultures, cut hair and nails are preserved not to protect. This was interesting. They were buried or gotten rid of, or protected, I should say, against sorcery, but to ensure the body's ability to resurrect, which I thought was really interesting. Um, the Patagonians would burn their hair to hide it. But yeah, some of these tribes, I'm trying to think of the ones that had resurrection beliefs. If we're on 415, yeah, in Melanesia and among South African tribes like the Kafris extend the sphere by preserving head vermin and returning it to the owner, believing its blood-derived connection could grant a sorcerer supernatural power over the individual if misused. And in Ireland, Drumconrath, old women kept hair in cottages' thatches, expecting to account for it at Judgment Day based on scriptural references to numbered hairs. This is the idea that God is like knows all the hairs on your head. I did a lot of talking there. We went through a lot of different things, but I think that's a pretty efficient way to cover all these different taboos that are associated with hair. So I'll just stop talking and let you guys weigh in on that. I mean, I think the thing that was most interesting to me was the resurrection dimension to this, because that presents a new wrinkle to this understanding.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a striking visual identifier that it's very prevalent, and it's like you have a visceral reaction to it. Like even watching someone grab your hair after it's cut, it's like, why are you holding my hair? Why it's not
Yeah,
on my head? Things like that. It has a very visual sensation, aspect to it. So I'm thinking, and even it's like if you're talking about, a maturation of a person. So if when boys start to grow beards, so it's like, oh, this person is now entering manhood, or he has chest hair, or things like that. So it's a visual identifier in that sense as well. So it's a very intimate part of a person, I think, hair.
that's a great thing that you bring up. We're thinking about hair just in regards to hair on your head, but that's not the only place that hair grows, right? Like, okay, so there are all these taboos with the hair that's on your head, but what about the hair on your chest and other body parts, right? Like, what are the taboos for that? And presumably some of them are the same because of the sympathetic connection. Oh, I've got his hair. If I bury it, I can cause this wasting sickness. Is it from the head or is it from the chest? It doesn't matter. It's from him. Or does it matter? Because we've seen that they believe that this sensitive spirit was in the crown, or this seems to be a universal thing. Well, what did they think was on the torso? Anything? Was this not of concern? I think it raises interesting questions. And also, like I was saying, I use the example of the Irish women. That kind of makes sense if they're drawing from scripture, which we all know has this idea of resurrection. But Frazer talks about the Incas of Peru, Turks, and Armenians who also did this whole thing with preserving the hair because of resurrection concerns. And what's so interesting about that, right, is that it kind of shows the universality of this idea of resurrection. That's the thing that's really fascinating to me. Not necessarily that you need to hold on to all your teeth and your hair or whatever so you're properly resurrected, that this is like widespread. It's in the Incas had this idea.
I
Do
mean,
do people
maybe
do people in India believe in resurrection?
I don't think they believe in resurrection. I think they believe in reincarnation. That's what they
Yeah,
believe in. I mean, maybe before. I mean, it's talking about Armenia. Armenia is supposedly close to, Israel, or where Jesus is. It. I'm not sure. I think it's in the same ballpark. That whole, Turkey, and Middle East. So maybe that practice was already going on. People hoping for some sort of resurrection and keeping those hairs and everything while the Bible was being, written down, or when Christ was, alive.
you're right.
Is it?
It does border Turkey and Azerbaijan. So maybe this is the Christian influence. I don't know. I mean, certainly the Incas
Um,
is not.
yeah, the Incas is pretty different, but Turks, they are the oldest civilization, I think, been under recorded, like Anatolia and everything. That's the oldest ever civilization. So if they have these beliefs of resurrection, I think it might hold some water, that they these beliefs would have spread, on the surrounding area, and maybe towards the Middle East and Egypt and all those places. Um,
Google AI is telling me that the Incas are closer to reincarnation than resurrection, but who even knows? I got to go deeper into it. I'll make a note of it. Jordan, what do you think about all this?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, like Ostic said, like I have my own kind of reaction when cutting my hair. Like, do I throw it away? Like, what do I do with it? It's weird because it's kind of a part of you, and not necessarily just the hair, but like when you go get teeth pulled and things like that, and they keep the things or they say that they're like bio waste and things like that. What is going on there? Like, you have all these cultures here who are like, oh no, no, like you can't take anything that is produced by my body because you're going to do something with it.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about the whole conversation about like what are wisdom teeth, right? And why
Sure.
like what's going on with the preponderance of wisdom teeth extractions? Like it's like, well, time to get those out. Well, wait, are we
Mm-hmm.
sure? Like, are we just is
Yeah.
this just about making money, or is there something else going on here? It'd be cool to, we talked about the transplantation essence personality shift. I wonder if there's like something similar going on with like when people wear wigs and stuff like that, made out of human hair.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a crazy thing to think about given what we've talked about so far?
No, like if somebody's cutting their hair out of mourning or like, and Ostic, maybe fill in and correct me. My perception of that is like you're releasing energy from you so that you can properly move on or like integrate that experience and not like continue to hold on to that energy. But then if other people are buying that and then wearing that, like that makes me like a little averse to getting hair extensions, right? That are somebody else's real hair and like putting them on my body. That seems not super wise energetically.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's up to you, I think. But uh, I mean, with the morning thing, they cut their hair especially because it's like a new start, a new beginning, or it's a visual identifier to everyone around you that someone has passed away in your family. So it's a social thing. I don't think people are very deep into it, thinking about energies and everything. It's like everyone is doing it, so we'll have to do it. People don't think too deeply here. From my experience, they follow whatever the priest tells them. So, and whatever the norms are, the customs are, people are not very deep thinkers in these terms. It's
Oh,
taboo to talk about it or to question it.
oh,
Yeah.
we just have so many deep thinkers in America. Let me tell you, and people just love it when you call in their sacred cows. No, I'm being facetious, obviously. I'm thinking back to, I don't know if it was the last broadcast that we did or two broadcasts. You're like, oh, I didn't think like stuff like all these rituals and taboo things were going on in America. I was like, dude, it's the analogy I think that Jordan uses all the time. Like, I don't know if Jordan, is this the way you say it? Like, we're just like swimming in it. It's like, does a fish know it's in water? It really takes doing work like this for you to get kind of an objective perspective about how drenched you are in all this antiquated right. So,
You talked about one thing. You talked about people changing their personalities. I think it's not. I mean, it's because simply the hair gives people confidence in themselves. I mean, if cancer patients are wearing wigs, so they find a renewed confidence, and you would not go around saying that, oh, this person, he has gotten a new personality downloaded. It's like it's a very basic thing. It's a Girardian
I
thing. It's like, yeah, I'm saying that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, which potentially normalizes some of the psychic connection between these different things, but um
But there is a deep
I don't
connection,
know
I
if that
think.
is
Both
I don't know
things
if
are
that
going on.
disbands all the mystery. So, all right. Let's get through the rest of these taboo things and take a short break if we can, because I might need a little energy to bring home the Apollo 12 stuff. But I think we can effectively skip over the spittle stuff. Is going to be the same as the hair. The section 9 on spittle, is generally it's the same deal, right? There's this belief that there is a sympathetic magical connection to one's spit, just like there is with hair. So you've got to be super careful that sorcerers don't get a hold of it. And it's also like the nail clippings. There is this element that saliva, because it is kind of seen as an extension of the individual, that there's something to like the swapping of saliva as far as like contractual agreements and things like that, as like kind of a way to seal the bond that in your contract. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if there's something similar when it comes to like hair, like you wear my hair and I wear your hair. I'm not really sure it works like that, but saliva, it does. It's kind of like the whole blood brothers thing. Like we're intermingling our essence, our shared commitment to something. Then we have these taboos on food from page 418. Certain sort of taboos that are associated with animals that are believed to be deleterious or fatal. Let's just look at one of these. Like in Egypt, the kings could only they could only eat veal and geese to maintain their sanctity. This is part of their diet. I don't know if we keep going here to 419, we can look at the Fernando Poe King cannot eat common foods like cocoa, deer, porcupine after installation. What are the individual mythologies and stories and narratives that are associated with why they can only eat certain things or other things? But essentially, there's the idea that we're not going to invite spiritual harm into their being by consuming these specific foods. I don't know if it's like some revenge from the spirit. That seems to be track with what we've covered so far. But yeah, he's just documenting it. Are there certain things you won't eat, Ostic? Are you vegetarian?
Yes, I am, but I've tried to eat non-vegetarian food just to see why people are so mad about it. I'm like, w- people will talk about like, oh, this chicken, it does not compare to anything else. I'm like, what's the big deal? Then I ate it and like, it's okay, it's rubbery. So I'm like, out of curiosity and research purposes only, for the record. And I eat eggs. I like eggs. I mean, the things about this, what I'm interested in is something else. Uh, I think, yeah, I remember the Andy Warhol quote, and Andy Warhol said that since we are moving in a situation in our lives where food and everything is, I'm paraphrasing it, is so readily available, then how would the rich differentiate themselves? So what they'll do is they'll not drink the coke that a regular person can buy and drink. They'll avoid that. They'll buy bottled water, and they'll buy a very expensive bottled water. So it's like they're buying things that are freely available and then creating luxury items out of it, just to differentiate themselves from the poor ones. You're like, I drink water, I drink this $40 water, and you drink tap water, things like that, I'm saying. So Andy
Yeah,
Warhol said that we are entering this age where, because technology has, eased our lives to such an extent that these are the levels that people are stooping to create differentiation between them and others. That thought
that's
entered my mind.
an interesting point. I'm sure Jordan has a lot to say about food as well. I've primarily adopted her diet. Very infrequently do I consume meat now. It's really not a problem. From a from a body composition perspective, I'd like to get more protein in my diet so I can. It's a whole thing, like the keto idea, but I haven't really quite figured that out. But I enjoy eating primarily vegetarian. It's been a good time.
If only we had easy to metabolize protein supplements in bottles all over the house.
Do you want to do a plug for Purium right now? You
To
can.
you, yeah. If you need more
Good.
protein, it's all around you.
I know, but I I like a burger every once in a while.
Well, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. That's not yeah,
I will
understand.
I'm sitting here asking like, awesome, oh, what do they do in India? You don't eat any meat or whatever. But there's these coming from a Western country, and going back to the Bible, there are all sorts of food restrictions in the Bible. Primarily, the one that I believe that is shared amongst the Abrahamic faiths is a general avoidance of pork.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, before I actually read the Bible, like I would hear people go, oh, well, there is this ancient wisdom. They knew pork was unclean because, uh, they kind of had this understanding that like disease would be communicated through an animal that like wallowed in its own filth. So there's like kind of this download from God, hey, don't do that. But I think it actually goes deeper in that, because if you look in the Bible, and this is where things gets back to our transplantation conversation, is that one of the most interesting miracles that Jesus ever performed was that he did a exorcism of a man who contained a legion of demons in him. And the townspeople were like, asked them to put it, or they were mad at him. And so like Jesus put them in a herd of pigs, and then the pigs jumped off this cliff and killed themselves. And it raises a very interesting question about whether or not like unclean spirits, at least from a Christian or perhaps Judeo-Christian perspective, if these particular animals are containers and vessels for like demons. I think there's this, and that's really where that comes from. And then you think about that, if that understanding is tracking with reality at all. I'm not saying it is, just think about it. A lot of, if you look at like pigs, if you like zoom in on like a pig's eye or whatever, it looks a lot like a human eye. Like we're not getting these when we do xenotransplantation and stuff like that. We're not like, you would think that we would be getting it from like hominids and gorillas and stuff. Like, it's not happening. If evolution is right, like you'd think we'd be getting all these transplantation procedures from like monkeys, but from the most high profile xenotransplantation cases that and maybe this has changed, come from pigs. So it's like, why is it that the human body is not rejecting pig parts like it would other animals? I haven't dug into the science, but that strikes me as very strange. Very
Mhm.
strange.
Intuitively, I stopped eating pork very early. Nobody told me. It just it's like, "Don't do that."
Yeah.
I can't really explain it.
Yeah.
And then later, like, I started to learn different things, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that kinda makes sense." But they were justifications kind of after the fact, you know? But on the
Mhm.
reverse side, I would say, being a Texan, and in many parts of America, if you don't eat meat, people take that very offensively. It's very fascinating how your individual choices trigger other people. So it's kind of like the reverse taboo.
Mm. Yeah.
People think you think you're better than me. You think you're better than me.
Jordan
I
has to
think
deal with
that's
that
what
a
goes
lot.
on in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jordan's very clean with her diet, and she's always having to defend herself to people. They're like, "Oh, what do you think you're better than me?"
I don't really try to defend it. I don't really try to persuade anyone. If someone has a question or wants to talk to me about it, I have a lot of information. But I think too, it's like if I really got into it, I think it would sound more like an indictment of other people's choices. And that's not really my intention. People can do whatever they want. But it is fascinating. Like you don't even have to say anything. Just the fact that you don't participate in something.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Okay.
Hmm.
Rings and knots. You guys ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we go to slide 420. So many cultures prohibit knots during critical times like childbirth, marriage, and death, believing they could spiritually hinder processes such as delivery. So the superstition is that knots impede life transitions. In many cultures, knots are believed to tie up a woman in labor, impeding childbirth through homeopathic magic, where a physical knot creates a corresponding obstacle in her body. And also, the belief in the knot's obstructive power leads to practices of opening all locks, doors, and containers during childbirth. So, I never really heard about this. Jordan made an allusion to it earlier with the crossing of one's legs. I think we even think about it psychologically, right? Like if someone is like closed off, right? If someone's body language is like all knotted up, right? But yeah, some examples of this. The Flamen Dialis in Rome was forbidden to have knots in his garments or wear an unbroken ring, reflecting a broader taboo shared by Muslim pilgrims to Mecca who avoid knots and rings during their sanctified state. Transylvania Saxons, all knots on a laboring woman's garments are untied and house locks open to ease childbirth, like we said. We could go to the next slide, 421. Looking at how knots are thought to obstruct activities like marriage or childbirth. We have the Tumbula of Norse celebs. A man avoids tying knots and sitting with crossed legs during his wife's pregnancy, as both actions are believed to impede childbirth through homeopathic magic by obstructing natural processes. We can go on. This was all just very interesting to me. On slide 422, knots are believed to wield maleficent power, causing sickness, misfortune, or death through sympathetic magic, as seen among the Hos of West Africa. I'm sorry. In primitive beliefs, knots believed to cause illness through sympathetic magic can also heal by being undone to alleviate the sufferer's condition. Beyond this, some knots are thought to have inherent healing powers. Knots are also used by enchantresses to magically bind lovers, which is, it's kind of interesting. The idea of like tying the knot, right? So depending on the context kind of shift. You don't want to talk about knots during one's marriage ceremony because that impedes the good blessing or whatever. But then also at the same time, if you want to involve knots in your sorcery or whatever to make someone love you, that's possible as well in certain cultures. Did you guys have any big insights from this?
I'm just curious, like, what does tying the knot actually mean, like literally, in your marriage ceremonies? Like,
Do
do
you
you
want to handle
actually
that,
tie
Jordan?
knots together?
I probably don't have a better answer
I mean, it's just a
than you
symbol of
all.
it's just a symbol. I think
Binding.
it's just a bind. If you got two pieces of thread or of rope or whatever, and you want to unite them, you tie a knot, you bind. It's a physical. I'm sure there are people
Mm.
who even physically tie knots at weddings, but it's
Mhm.
all kind of seen as like symbolic. That feels like something I've seen somewhere. I can't remember, but it's just like kind of an expression we use for getting married over here.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mhm.
I mean, because growing up, I heard about it and thought like, oh, they're literally tying knots, and they do in India during weddings, like in different cultures. So they tie the knot and they circle a fire to promise in Hindu weddings. So that's what I thought. I thought like this is some universal experience for everyone, that people are always tying knots. And then I thought, so growing up, oh, they're only doing ring ceremonies and in during marriages in Christian weddings. So I thought, why are
I
they
think
saying tying knot?
I think the idea the rings and the knots are like interchangeable in some way because you can have the ring, you can bring the rings together to form a chain, the uniting
Mhm.
of
Oh,
forces.
right. Right, right, right,
Mhm.
right. That's
Yeah.
a very
Yeah.
intuitive idea as well, with doctors talking about, you know, you have knots in your body, so I'll
Yeah.
I'll relieve the knots.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you go to the
People talk
chiropractor.
about, Yeah, people talk about having knots in their stomach or in their shoulder, things like that. And I don't know, cramps. I think they're caused by your veins having some kind of knots. I'm not sure. I think about, like, people talk about, like, in my culture, when I was growing, they say that this is what is happening in your body. Your veins have tangled together, so that is why you're experiencing this cramp. So I thought about it in that terms. So it's like it's a good metaphor for tension, I think. Not.
I think so too. Well, I think we have effectively covered the Golden Bough material for today. Do you guys want to take 5 minutes and then we'll reconvene to talk about the crazy stuff?
Sounds good. I could use a break.
Oh yeah. Okay. Let's do that. Let's reconvene in 5 to 10 minutes, okay?
Sounds great.
All right. Hey, now we're back. Hope you guys had a good break. So let's dig into the things that are relevant to this archetypal decode of the Apollo missions that I've been working on. And that is partially inspired by the Golden Bough. So here we go. It's going to get wild. Osic's going to like this. All right. So the first thing that I wanted to bring to our attention here is when we look at the different Apollo landing maps, I think it's important to understand, like, the map that is assumed, the naming nomenclature, where that came from. It came from this map called the Riccioli and Grimaldi lunar map. It's from 1660. I believe its technical name is Almestum Novum. And this is where we get the Sea of Tranquility. And in Apollo 12, they land in a region called the Ocean of Storms, or Oceanus Procellarum. And I think that's interesting in a way, right? Where we go from the Sea of Tranquility to one of the larger landing spots on the entire moon, the Ocean of Storms. There is this tension, this dichotomous, maybe it's a union of opposites. I don't know. We'll have to think about that a little bit, because we see when we looked at these numinous numbers, 12 is going to be interrupted by the transgressive failure of Apollo 13 and all the numinous load that carries with it. Something I thought was interesting, and I don't know if I said this when we were talking about the matriarchal feminine symbolism that is associated with the moon. I think it's very interesting that all these different mares that they're landing on, that is, the name Mary is associated with the sea, Maria, Mary. And we've talked about the Virgin Mary in regards to Revelation 12 syncing up with these Apollo missions, but also these the great mother goddesses like Artemis, like Diana, like the Virgin Mary being associated with the moon. So I don't think that is an unimportant detail when we think about landing on seas and oceans on the moon. But there's a lot more to be said about this. I mean, one of the interesting details about this map is that in Latin, in the top left-hand corner, I believe it says "Nec homines lunam inculunt," which means no men reside on the moon. Now, that could be kind of maybe that's interesting, or maybe that's not interesting, that this is the map that we're using to determine where the landings happen. So I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to probably just go off of memory here. I mentioned earlier that the name of the lander for Apollo 12 was Intrepid. And I believe that just like relates to an old ship, although I'm sure there's much more to it that I've yet to uncover. But the one that jumped out at me was the command module. It's called the Yankee Clipper. Now, why is that interesting? You could say that the Yankee Clipper is just another ship, and there's just more of the nautical themes, which is interesting in and of itself, because we've talked about the relationship between the astronauts and the Argonauts and being star sailors. And I think that there's a level of that's true and interesting. But anyone who was alive in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s understood that the Yankee Clipper was one of the most celebrated nicknames for an American hero, and that is Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio had a bunch of different nicknames. He was known as Joltin' Joe, Joe D. One that I particularly like that I'll talk about here later on, he was also known, I think, among some people as Mr. Coffee, because in the early 80s, early 70s, he started being a spokesperson for a coffee maker. But Joe DiMaggio is so interesting, and I think it'd be not genuine to say, like, oh, when Americans heard Yankee Clipper, they didn't associate with Joe DiMaggio. Now, why is this interesting? Joe DiMaggio was a childhood hero / idol for Stanley Kubrick. It was one of being a kid from Queens. One of his Joe DiMaggio would have been like a god to him. And when he was in his teens, early 20s, I'm sure Ossick knows this, he was a photographer for Look magazine. And while he was a photographer for Look magazine, one of his most iconic photos that I ever took was of Joe DiMaggio. He was very proud of this, and as he should be. This photograph is very hard to come by. I think this is the right photo. I've got to pin down the publication of when it came out. Either came out in 51 or 52. I'm so a little loose on all of that. And what is so interesting about this, like, I mean, you can kind of on one level of interpretation, if we have one of Kubrick's like childhood idols being the namesake for something that landed on the moon, it's like, on a conspiratorial level, this is incredibly interesting. But what's also interesting about this is that Joe DiMaggio most famously was known to be married to Marilyn Monroe. Okay. Well, we've talked about Marilyn Monroe episodically throughout our study of the Golden Bough. We talked about her being like a beauty queen and like a symbol of the vegetative spirit when she won the Artichoke Queen in California, and connections to other unsavory things. But she was actually the very first Playboy cover girl, and she's technically not a playmate, because, or at least she's not technically the very first playmate, because the brand was kind of forming. It was a little bit amorphous. She was actually technically the sweetheart of the month, but then eventually it became the playmate of the month. So I guess in an indirect fashion, what I'm trying to say here is that we do have an inescapable association with arguably the most famous white rabbit in Marilyn Monroe. And she, in a variety of different ways, she appeared in Playboy magazine. Hugh Hefner would buy up the rights to these photos and publish them there. So she is very much associated with the brand. So this just kind of goes into our stockpile of white rabbits that are associated with the moon. Now, what's interesting, we'll get deeper into this, there seems to be, of the white rabbits that we've determined are there, a lot of them are associated with Apollo 12. Some other things I want to point out here. Apollo 12 was struck by lightning twice. And we've talked about this as being representative or perhaps emblematic of the Battle of the Titans, the struggle between Zeus and Kronos, or Saturn and Jupiter. And I find that very interesting that that Apollo 12 had this connection to Joe DiMaggio being the Yankee Clipper, and his name is, another of his nicknames is Joltin' Joe, right? Like Apollo 12 got hit by 2 jolts of lightning. I find that to be incredibly fascinating. Not to mention we're kind of doing like baseball deep history here. One of the things that's Joe DiMaggio is best known for on the baseball field is that he has this 56 game hit streak, which has never been broken. It is considered to be one of the most impossible records to attain and surpass. And I think it statistically shouldn't exist. So that hitting streak is kind of associated with Joe DiMaggio. So I think if you step back, you start to think about things that statistically shouldn't be able to exist. and you're associating that with moon landing stuff, I think you can kind of get the bigger picture. And the fact that, and there seems to be some, this is getting way out there, but the fact that he became the spokesman for Mr. Coffee later, coffee is something to wake you up, right? You see this hammered into us. Like if you watch Twin Peaks or whatever, like the detective, Cooper is always drinking coffee, right? The idea is like, this is to kind of kick your brain to a higher state so you can pick up on the patterns. And I find this to be very interesting. And one of the last things I want to say here before I open it up to you guys, Jordan, can you zoom in? Like, so this is the Yankee Clipper. If you can zoom in, what I noticed on these things, we've talked about noticing like mouse faces and other faces and things like that on these craft. And it's the one there in the bottom left hand corner. Can
Yeah,
you
give me a
zoom in?
It's not super easy to zoom in the way we have it set up, so give me a moment.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Or if you want to Google the image.
Yeah.
And also, so I'll pause there for a second. And Osik, tell me what you think so far.
I mean, if you talked about the moon being associated with the female spirit and Queen Mary. I mean, Marilyn Monroe, her name itself carries that Marian thing inside it of it. So it's like if you're talking about Joe DiMaggio,
Yes.
and they're like this powerful couple in the public imagination. So it's like you are creating some sort of a union between the two, and it's like this landing on the ocean of storms. So it's like you talked about Jupiterian things, and this Jupiterian things being related to the male parts of the human psyche. So yeah, it's in contrast to landing in the sea of tranquility, because sea are associated with the female parts of the human psyche, and storms are supposed to be connected to the male parts. So they're creating two different scenarios, I think. Just that.
That's a great observation. I love it. Actually, I might just look up the etymology. Were you able to zoom in on the picture that I had there, Jordan?
Yeah, I've been going through a few different ones.
Oh, can you get back to it?
Yeah. Is this what you?
Yeah, that's fine. That's a good enough one. Can you zoom in? You see right above. So we talked about there being kind of like when the balloons deploy, there's kind of like a mouse head on here. But like zoom in, go zoom in right above the hatch. Like it almost looks like there is a Mickey Mouse. I hate saying I look so crazy. Do you see the mouse ears and the mouse eyes kind of like peering over the top of this?
I think it's more obvious here.
Yeah, it's pretty visible.
I have looked at this thing forever. It's like it's there when the balloons are inflated, and when you zoom in on this, whatever's going on here, it looks like there's a Mickey Mouse head peeking out over the hatch.
Yeah.
And this gets into the whole like Apollo being the god of mice thing, right? And the Disney connections.
Yeah, that's interesting.
This is like I'm seeing like Mickey faces inside of Mickey faces. I'm losing my mind.
I mean, there's another baseball player called Mickey Mantle. So it's like if you're going with baseball. So
Yeah. Yeah, look at that. It looks like there's two mice there. Okay, I think I've lost. Jordan's like, no, this is not.
No, I agree. I'm just trying to find different pictures that more clearly show it.
it's
Because I had the same thought. Like,
okay, you see it too. It's not
yeah,
just me that's seeing it.
it's
Okay.
it's more obvious when you find the pictures of it with the balloons inflated. So like,
There you go. Jeez, God, does that look like a mouse?
Yeah.
It looks like such a mouse there.
Mhm.
That's the that's hard to deny.
And these, like, hands are interesting.
Yeah. All right. We can look at we can see faces in it all the time. I'm so into this like seeing faces thing. I started to see a face in the Mr. Coffee machine. So I'm like, where does this end?
Yeah,
All right. So I want to build on this. This is super fascinating. So we can go to slide 425.
you got it.
All right. So that is I found like 4 different rabbits like in this little research dig. So what I want to bring to your attention here is that during Apollo 12, and Apollo 12 consisted of Pete Conrad, Alan Bean, and let me make sure I have this right. Was it Jack Swigert? No, Richard F. Gordon Jr. My bad. So Pete Conrad was a real jokester, real interesting character. And what he did, uh, he brought a country music mixtape to outer space. And he played the very first country music song from outer space. And it's a track from Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. And the song is San Antonio Rose. Now, I think it was New San Antonio Rose. You've got to listen to this song. This song is, I can't imagine this song being broadcast from outer space. It is a trippy song. And what I thought was so interesting about this is that we have another Playboy reference. So we have the Playboy bunnies on the wrist cuffs of the Apollo 12 astronauts, right? That's the most obvious and direct link to this. We have the Yankee Clipper, where that's Joe DiMaggio. Possibly, it's not admitted that that's what they got the name. They say it's from a boat, but everyone knew that Yankee Clipper was associated with Joe DiMaggio, who was married to Marilyn Monroe, who was on the cover of Playboy, the very first one, right? And now we have Bob Wills and the Texas Playboy. So we have more rabbits. And right before I got on here to do this, I went back to go listen to the song. It's a great song. And I noticed that all the track listings were 2 minutes and 37 seconds long. And so it's a 237. So numerologically, from like the Kubrickian part of this, is this interesting? Is this uninteresting? I don't know. And I did determine that Bob Wills is considered to be the king of Western swing. And we see a lot of this there's this like category in a lot of the Apollo stuff where there's like the father of something, like Wernher von Braun is like the father of the rocketry program. This idea that the first country song was from the king of Western swing. So fathers and kings are part of this whole puzzle on one layer of it. I leaned a little bit hard into like the conspiracy stuff with this stuff, but I think there's an emergent archetypal like universe arranging things element to it. But yeah, I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. I mean, why this particular song? So many songs to choose from.
A lot of songs to choose from, right? And I think it's probably interesting too. It's San Antonio Rose. I bet that Rose is interesting. Like it kind of there's this that might get into this whole Garden of Eden narrative that I'm going to talk a little bit about here, which we've talked about a little bit already, right? Like we talked about during Apollo 8, they read Genesis 1. We've talked about I don't know if Ostic was there for this, but we talked about like the Genesis rock. Uh, there are a number of things that are connected to the first book of the Bible and Genesis that are in this little tapestry, this little puzzle.
I mean, the rose that is being mentioned in this particular song, is it an actual rose or it's like someone being resurrected or something?
I think it's a reference to a sweetheart. Jordan knows the song better than me. Like it's a way to
Mhm.
call some. Isn't that a way to like call someone your sweetie or something?
Yeah, I think he's talking about a girl.
Yeah, it's like a woman.
Ooh.
Hmm.
I found beside the Alamo enchantment strange as the blue up above, a
Mm.
moonlit path that only she would know. Still hears my broken song of love, moon, and all your splendor knows only my heart. Call back my rose, rose of sand and tone. So we've
Wait,
got
those
moon
lyrics.
references.
I didn't even think to look at the lyrics.
And at the
Oh my
beginning,
gosh.
it says, so it's deep within my heart lies a melody, a song of old San Antone, where in dreams I live with a memory beneath the stars all alone.
I mean,
I
That's
could sing it,
great.
I won't.
That's
talking
great.
about San Antonio. So it's San Antonio is Saint Anthony, and Saint Anthony. There are different stories about Saint Anthony. One is Saint Anthony's temptation. So it's like I think
Mm,
I relate it with
mhm,
Danny. So it's like he's tempted, and Saint Anthony is depicted in paintings with his face covered, and he's like being tempted by seductresses, and all these worldly
Mm.
desires. So I think about Danny from The Shining in that terms, like Saint Anthony, because he is Anthony as well. He talks to Tony, and Saint Anthony's fire. And Saint Anthony's fire is what? It is the. Do you know about Saint Anthony's fire?
I know about St. Elmo's fire.
Okay, Saint Anthony's fire is in the 15th century. What happened was a lot of villagers, they ate crops that had some fungus on them. So after they ate it, they had these very wild hallucinations, and they're like, have you seen that painting by Hieronymus Bosch painting? That kind of
Mm.
visions they started
Yeah.
having. So people speculate that Hieronymus Bosch, was also taking that fungus ridden whatever crop it was, and artificially um kind of in uh, creating that feeling within himself. And what happened was, from that particular crop was LSD actually extracted from. So what people used to call Saint Anthony's fire, people used to call it Saint Anthony's fire because people started going mad, and they had this very fantastical nightmare. And from that particular fungus was LSD like separated, and then
No.
that is
Are you
true.
serious?
So
Oh my
I
gosh.
I think I read about it, so I think it's the Saint Anthony's
Well, I'm gonna
fire.
have to look into that.
Yeah, ergot fungus. Ergot. After it's an, I think you would know about it. I think it's an American thing. People talk about like corn being some, I don't know. People talked about very strange things about America. They said like this corn, it's being planted here by aliens, and this corn has some strange things. Yeah, just it's a stupid thought. But that and Saint Anthony's fire thing is true. Just like LSD was extracted from that particular thing. People talk about it.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I've got a McGill article here that connects it to the Beatles as well, which is one of our favorite shared topics. But yeah, I'm going to have to go way deeper into this. Jordan, did you want to add anything to this before we go to the next slide?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure there's just layers to it. I don't know. I mean, San Antonio is also a place. I don't know if San Antonio has any connections to
To the
NASA
Apollo mission?
or the Apollo missions. I'm sure there's stuff there. I mean, it's like not terribly far from Houston. A quick search, there seems to be some activity there. Um, the moon connection is interesting to me. Roses, that's more of a Mary Magdalene thing than a Mother Mary thing. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I hadn't thought to look, like, I know the song, it's just part of the cultural backdrop, but I hadn't really thought about it.
Wonder how many people were in the Texas Playboys?
Yeah, it's kind of a big band, like, I think there's like different people over time too.
Between 6 and 22.
Yeah,
I was going
so
to say, in
that's
this picture, it
interesting.
almost seems like there's 12, which would be interesting. Typically
Yeah.
between 9 and 18, according to Google.
I mean, with all these personalities, like you pick this song and then you'll play it. There's a lot of mischievousness in these personalities of these astronauts as well, because I feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
yes, they're very mischievous in nature. It's like you're responsible for such a huge project, like billions of dollars are on the line, and then you're like bringing up these inside jokes and everything. It's pretty
Mhm.
Yeah.
strange, yeah. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the mental pressure would be a whole lot more. Yeah.
You'd think. You'd think. Especially like when you start thinking about like the thing that doesn't make sense to me is the obsession with like you had to be very judicious about weight, right? Because it that affected every little increase in weight affected how much fuel you had to use in order to do this. It totally caused a reworking of all the rocket equations.
Mhm.
And like you said, if it's that sensitive and you're constantly bringing ham sandwiches and flags and plaques and mixtapes and things like that that are not always authorized, um, it raises a very interesting question about what's happening here. Not to mention just the like the moon rocks and things like that that they bring back. I mean, I don't know how accurately they could weigh them when they were doing all of that. And just
Mhm.
bring back sacks of rocks.
Yeah, that's pretty
You know,
interesting. Like,
that's
how would you weigh them without the
what's that?
gravitational pull? I mean, yeah, they
Yeah,
would have a different. Yeah, that's good.
yeah. It's just don't think about it too much. just you'll end up in a strange place. Okay.
This isn't on the slide, and it's a bit of a stretch, but another band that was very influenced by the Texas Playboys, and then after Bob Wills passed, like they continued to use the like the original Texas Playboys. Like my parents went and saw them. Um, is Asleep at the Wheel. I just think that's interesting. There's this CD we had at home that my sister and I liked to listen to all the time by
Really?
Asleep at the Wheel, and it's this, it's very much in the musical tradition of Bob Wills. And occasionally they would play together at like festivals and things like that. But I wouldn't say they're like the same band or anything like that, but there's definitely a lineage there. And that's just another interesting
Mm,
concept.
yeah, it is. The word asleep kind of came up for me. Well, I think there's like an experiment that they did in Apollo 12,
Hmm.
or called ALSEP. It looks like a scramble of asleep, but I didn't really say anything about it. But I want to talk a little bit about Sherlock Holmes. If we can go to
Yeah. Oh,
426,
finally.
and finally talking about Sherlock Holmes.
Good.
Okay, so what do I want to say here? I managed to take a look at the very first issue of Playboy. And what was so surprising to me when I looked into it is like one of the major articles that they feature. You always hear this stuff like you are supposed to read Playboy for the articles, or men will say that I read Playboy for the articles. And I used to think that was a joke, and I've said this here and other places. It's true, you really need to, because there's all sorts of very high-minded disclosure that's going on in Playboy magazine, and I have no idea why. I think it's got connections to other things. I don't know why they're choosing to offload it there. I think it's gets into this whole following the white rabbit, and Playboy is so notoriously associated with that. But early on in the publication history of Playboy magazine, in order to provide enough content, Hugh Hefner would take stories and things like that that were in the public domain and either publish shortened versions of them or them in their entirety. This was like cheaper than having to commission new material in many cases. And in the very first issue is I believe it's the second Sherlock Holmes story called Sign of Four, or The Sign of Four. And I was like, why is Sherlock Holmes in the very first issue of Playboy with Marilyn Monroe? I did a little bit of digging, and it turns out that Hugh Hefner is a massive, I mean massive fan of Arthur Conan Doyle's character Sherlock Holmes. And it even stands to reason that him smoking the exact same pipe as Sherlock Holmes is taken from his admiration of this character of Doyle's. And it really makes a lot of sense. Like, especially, and it really is like contributes. If you start to understand the backstory for that, it really starts to make things really crazy. You think about like the Dionysian frenzy of the Playboy Mansion parties, right? And Hugh's walking around with a Sherlock Holmes pipe in his mouth. Like, think about the contrast of that, right? Where he's like essentially the detective in the middle of this orgy. And I think about like how emblematic that is for like kind of what we're doing here. Like, we're like arising out of this Dionysian orgiastic experience that is modernity and becoming like this Hefner like detective. But you can even see here, this is, I believe, in the mid 2000s. You can see that, and this is in the Sherlock Holmes Museum. I I think this is in the UK, but you can see Hef posing in front of the Sherlock Holmes Museum with his three Playboy playmate girlfriends who are all white rabbits. So you have White Rabbit, Sherlock, White Rabbit. If you want to be really reductionist about it, and he has this tweet that he put out in 2010. As a lifelong fan of Sherlock Holmes, I found the new film on the great detective fresh, inventive, and truly entertaining. I guess maybe that was one with Robert Downey Jr. I didn't see it, but he Hef was always involved in like preserving Sherlock Holmes material. It was just a lifelong abiding passion for him. So we see, whether Hef knew this or not, we see this merger in his magazine and really throughout his whole life of this Sherlockian character with white rabbits. So then that kind of got me looking a little bit deeper into the connection, like what is going on with white rabbits and Sherlock Holmes. And by the way, I'm going to try to watch this. Apparently there's lots of theatrical adaptations of the Sign of Four story. I don't really know it too well. So there'll probably be some update on this. I suspect this Sign of Four story is going to be super significant for all the things that we look into here. So I can go on just to the next slide, unless one of you wants to say something real quick.
A few
Yeah.
years ago, you made a standalone episode about Sherlock Holmes, and you talked about Stanley Kubrick saying that people should be able to use deductive techniques like Sherlock Holmes uses to,
Yeah.
watch movies. So I'm just
Yeah.
thinking whether that is somewhat connected to this whole thing. Do you remember
I
it?
think it very much. Yeah, yeah. I think the reason why I said that, because in the making of The Shining, done by Vivian Kubrick, you see James Mason, right, show up on the set of The Shining, and I always thought that was strange, right? It's a very awkward encounter. You see what's going on there. But if you look at James Mason's clothes, I looked a little closely. I looked at his clothes and I was like, what's going on here? He looks like he's Sherlock Holmes. And then I dug into it. Oh, lo and behold, he was making a Sherlock Holmes movie the same time they were filming The Shining. And he came from the studio wearing his Sherlock Holmes outfit. I think he's Watson in it, actually. I think Christopher Plummer plays Sherlock Holmes. But whatever, you get the idea, right? So it very much, there's some sort of message here about being a detective and what you need to do in order to understand that movie and really the movie that is our life. If you want to get really into it, this simulation that we find ourselves in, this collective dream that some of us have awoken into, which gets into my larger theory that I'm working on here. So yeah, and if we can build on this, I want to, referencing that old video that I did. I read the first because I've made this emphasis on like the first and the kings of and the fathers of. So I was like, what is the first Sherlock Holmes story? And that brings us into the next slide, Jordan, if we can go there. So, okay. So before I get into the first Sherlock Holmes story, what I want to say is I mentioned that this at the very beginning of this presentation is that Sherlock is all throughout all the space programs. Like they love referencing Sherlock Holmes. And we're even going to see him make another appearance in Apollo 17. They actually do a visitation to Sherlock Crater, right? And here you have an image of the rim of Sherlock Crater that the Apollo 17 astronauts took. To be honest, it looks like a very familiar rock formation. I've yet to track it down, but I think it's terrestrial. But I'll get into that some other time. And I did a little search also. I was like, why am I seeing this connection between white rabbits and Sherlock Holmes? And Jordan even made this. She's like, isn't the white rabbit from Alice in Wonderland? Doesn't he kind of dress like Sherlock Holmes? I was like, you're right. But I think it was just kind of the Victorian dress, and maybe that's why there's similarity. But then it gets a little deeper. Young and Jungians, I should say, many Jungians believe that Sherlock Holmes, given his kind of autistic nature, given that he's like hyper rational and so perplexing to so many individuals and capable of solving these riddles, many people associate Sherlock Holmes with the trickster archetype. And so, of course, we would have these references to Sherlock and rabbits and things like that together because they are both on a deeper cosmic level an eruption of the trickster archetype. And that's why I've got, I guess, Sherlock Holmes over here wearing bunny ears, or other people have picked up on what Jordan picked up on, the white rabbit wearing the Sherlock Holmes deer hunter cap, which is interesting in and of itself because it likely ties back into Catcher in the Rye, which also has the deer slayer hat too. That's a whole, I'm not going to get into all of that today. But something that I noticed when I first dug into this Sherlock Holmes material like years ago, the very first story that Arthur Conan Doyle ever did on Sherlock Holmes is called A Study in Scarlet. And I listened to it. I thought it was okay. And the biggest thing that jumped out at me, and I'll have Jordan read it, if that's okay. Jordan, you see that text right there, is that Sherlock Holmes doesn't believe in the solar system. Sherlock Holmes is a geocentrist or maybe even a flat earther. So with that, Jordan, why don't you read that?
Sure. The whole thing?
Sure,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I believe this is a dialogue between Watson and Holmes.
Yes.
His ignorance was as remarkable as his knowledge. Of contemporary literature, philosophy, and politics, he appeared to know next to nothing. Upon my quoting Thomas Carlyle, he inquired in the naivest way who he might be and what he had done. My surprise reached a climax. However, when I found incidentally that he was ignorant of the Copernican theory and of the composition of the solar system, that any civilized human being in this 19th century should not be aware that the Earth traveled round the sun, appeared to me to be such an extraordinary fact. I could hardly realize it. You appear to be astonished, he said, smiling at my expression of surprise. Now that I do know it, I shall do my best to forget it. To forget it? You see, he explained, I consider that a man's brain originally is like empty attic, and you have to stock it with such furniture as you choose. A fool takes in all of the lumber of every sort that he comes across, so that the knowledge which might be useful to him gets crowded out, or at best is jumbled up with a lot of other things, so that he has a difficulty in laying his hands upon it. Now, the skillful workman is very careful indeed as to what he takes into his brain attic. He will have nothing but the tools which may help him in doing his work. But none of these. He has a large assortment, and all of the most in the most perfect order. It is a mistake to think that the little room has elastic walls and can distend to any extent. Depend upon if there comes a time when for every addition of knowledge you forget something that you knew before. It is of the highest importance, therefore, not to have useless facts elbowing out the useful ones. But the solar system, I protested. What the deuce is it to me? He interrupted impatiently. You say that we go round the sun. If we went round the moon, it would not make a penny worth of difference to me or to my work.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. So
Yeah.
that is so fascinating. The idea is that he's like, look, I cannot do my proper deductive tasks here if I go and I fill my mind with all this like Copernican uh orbiting mechanics or whatever, right? So I'm just going to like put that in the garbage can immediately so I can like actually solve the case. And I think there's something profound in the practicality of that. Like I need to take something like that into heart because like I'm obsessed with information. And it's like, well, Luke, like how good of a house can you decorate or construct if you're constantly filling it up with useless knowledge? But anyway, I just think this is crazy that there are all these Sherlockian connections to the space program when he himself talks about it so negatively. Oh, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
There's like a lot of levels to this one.
Yeah.
But on the simplest one, I agree. I think it's a good reminder, especially today. Like today, there's so much information that is accessible to us. And I know we've mentioned Michael Hoffman before, but I need to dig more into it. But his whole concept of the revelation of the method, like we're in many ways being purposefully burnt out, overloaded, overwhelmed with information. So we numb out, or, we just have clouded minds. So we cannot proceed with clarity. And it's so hard to unlearn things. So I do like this approach of being discerning about what you're taking in, because even if you don't, it's not bad to take in multiple viewpoints, but at what point is the stuff you're evaluating really adding to an area of your life that is actually impactful? Sports might be one of these big arenas.
Yep. I agree, which I'm also guilty of enjoying.
It's okay.
Although,
It's
depending
okay.
on how the Commanders Cowboys game goes, I'll probably be vacating that knowledge. But yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to talk about when we talk about the revelation of the method because it seems like conspiracy culture is like almost mainstream. Like it's almost cool, right? It's the Overton window has shifted so much that everybody is talking about this stuff and it's like you have to wonder that seems like, especially when there's like so many gaping errors built into all the things that people have conspiracies about. It's like it was made to be discovered, right? And is the point of it in some way, like Jordan is alluding to induce a type of psychosis in people for some further plan that we do not understand? Yeah, Ostic. He's muted. Oh,
Um,
there you go.
I was looking at the coordinates of those systems. I like the story because I think I pointed out the same thing earlier as well, that who cares what happens in these systems? These are models that are for our understandings. Uh, I'm not surprised. I knew about the story and I had the same reaction back in 2016 when I read this. Then I said, oh, "What? He doesn't believe in the solar system? What fool!" But now I'm thinking like, yeah, he's a practical man and he has to keep
Yeah.
his tool shed neat and clean. Other
Mm.
things like, where did you get this image of Sherlock Holmes with rabbit ears? Like, is this related
Oh,
to the
I got it
story?
off. I got it off of some blog. Like there's like I think it was a blog on I should have included the link. I I think the I think let me go find it real quick. You guys chat.
Yeah,
But I think it I think
I wanted.
I think it was an article called "Who Reads the Articles in Playboy?" Sherlock Holmes does, or something like that.
Oh, right, right. Okay, okay. I was just trying to understand the context because I thought maybe it's some part of a story where he dons those rabbit ears for dramatic effect. Uh, that's
It's a blog here. I'm going to share. I should give because I meant to give credit to this and I didn't. Oh no, are we going to lose power? It's crazy here. If we lose power, Ostic, we'll hit you back.
I'll keep it alive while you guys
Yeah.
come
Don't
back.
close out.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
play some music here for the people.
Yeah.
Is it this
Uh,
first? Oh, yes. Okay.
I mean, other thing I wanted
I think
to
that's
add with the last discussion, I mean, this one is pretty self-explanatory. Like you have said whatever that need to be said. In the last slide, when you talked about James Mason and Christopher Plummer movie, I think have you seen that film?
I
Uh,
have. It's about like Jack the Ripper, I think.
yeah, it's about Jack
I
the
fr-
Ripper, and the climax, the big reveal is that the Jack the Ripper guy, he's from a Freemasonic lodge. He's like the head of the
mm,
lodge or something. So it's like that part is still going on. So that's pretty shocking. Like it's a very pretty that they are insinuating a very clear Freemasonic conspiracy about these Freemasonic conspiracies are pretty big in England. So I think that must be on his radar. So just wanted to point that,
Mhm.
bring that angle in as well. Just like some sort of a disclosure happening.
right. Well, the Jack the Ripper thing also connects back to Strangelove, where you have
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
character and then also another Jack, right?
Mhm.
Which we've been keeping tallies of. So it definitely brings that list of Jacks into play.
I mean, could it like why would you name that guy Jack the Ripper? Like, is it supposed to be symbolic of some sort? I mean, okay, that's a pretty gory name and that's a dangerous guy, but it's like some sort of a symptom of a society that why do Jack the Rippers emerge from a society? So this guy, you know, he's trying to. I'm trying to think about like it's a whole tapestry like you talk about, and then someone is putting a knife in and like tearing it all apart and like ripping it all apart. All these
Yeah.
connections you have made sophisticated, networks of communication, and this guy he's like ripping all those apart and taking control himself. So that is what I thought about. That's the image
I have
that
to
comes to
think,
my mind.
yeah, we should think about that. I'll make a note of it. I hadn't thought too much about why he named. I think you're talking about why Kubrick named his character Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Jordan might know better. That's Jordan's favorite Kubrick movie.
I don't know. I don't have the answer,
Okay.
but I mean, it's a bigger motif than just that one film,
Oh, of course.
and it's bigger than
Of
Kubrick
course.
too.
Yeah, certainly it is. Okay.
And I mean, was Jack the Ripper a character? I'm inclined to
I'm
believe
I I
probably.
I
think
mean,
I
the
think it's a
murders were
psyop.
pretty weird, man. Those murders were like too diabolical for a person, and then he gets away with it. It's like they
I think they said
insinuate
they
in the
just
movie
found
that
it.
it's a part of a Freemasonic ritual. Ritual killing is happening in the movie.
Mhm.
They insinuate that, so it's like pretty spooky to me to even think about it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, recently, Luke, I think this is what you were talking about recently. Didn't they say something like they found some DNA or like they solved the case or made
Yeah.
progress on the Jack the Ripper case? I was like, this is really weird. Like,
Yeah,
why?
it is weird.
I don't really believe you. Why are we talking about
I
this?
I'm just looking at I guess this is who they're saying was it Aaron Kosminski. Um and I'm not going to go. We got a lot to still cover here, so I don't want to go too much further. But yeah, I'm just seeing that he was born on 9/11. So he was a hairdresser too, which ties into our previous conversations.
Born on 9/11, man.
Yeah.
Just these things.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yep.
infuriating.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? I mean, I think when you look at, there's just stages that you pass through with all this conspiracy stuff, and then after a while, I'm just very thankful that I can see it, and I've got my little hyperfixation here, and hopefully it'll help me understand why our world is the way it is.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. Let's look at another Jack in 428. The Jack Kennedy connection to Apollo 12 is what I'm talking about here. So here's the actual traverse map from Apollo 12. And unlike last time, I was like, I could go through and kind of be like, oh, this crater and this formation is interesting, et cetera, et cetera. I think you really have to see the forest from the trees here. Okay. Like, and I have to say, Rich from One Eyed Jacks, like, he's the one that alerted me to this years ago. God rest his soul. But just look at the names of everything here: sharp, bench, head, halo, block. Right? It's like there's a sentence being expressed here, right? And there's at least two things that I think are being communicated, especially when we take into consideration all the white rabbits that seem to be associated with Apollo 12, which we've talked about already. And we're in that sort of Alice in Wonderland frame of mind, right? Like, so head, block, halo. That clearly calls to mind an expression we have in America or in the West is putting your head on the block, right? Or sticking my neck out for you, right? This is the idea that, like, I'm going to risk my reputation for you or for this thing or for this cause. And it goes back to the old idea of like having your head cut off, like via an executioner with an axe, and you put your head on the chopping block, right? And so that called to mind this whole off with her head thing from Alice in Wonderland. Also, because of the whole sharp bench head halo thing, there is Kennedy is, the one who set this initiative to go to the moon, right? He's the one that announced this mission, and in a way, he put his head on the block for it, right? Like this was the cause that he was really adamant about. And something about the Kennedy assassination is that one of the witnesses talked about hiding behind a bench when the single shot went out. And I wonder if we're being told a story about this too, like that this whole story is like coming out here. They say like all the features were astronaut named. I just find it interesting, or maybe it's just a big coincidence. I don't know. The other thing that jumped out to me was they had these two extra vehicular activities, these two two Eves, and that puts us back into this whole Garden of Eden conversation, because Eva is another name for Eve. And interestingly enough, associated with this Apollo 12 mission is Alan Bean, right? So Alan Bean, we got into this whole thing with like moon trees and beans and Jack. So seems to be some sort of emergent narrative here about Jack and the Beanstalk, which is associated with the Tree of Life, which is associated with the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis. And I talked about all the Genesis examples earlier. So I found that interesting that Alan Bean would be taking these these extravehicular activities. And what's also interesting is that Alan Bean had kind of a fixation with the Garden of Eden. He wrote about the Garden of Eden a lot in relationship to his trip to the moon. Jordan, do you want to read that for us? It's underneath the Red Queen there.
Yeah. I think Genesis in the Old Testament has it wrong. I don't think we were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. Just look around, we're still in it, particularly when you compare the earth with the moon. The moon has no plants, no life, no water, no animals, no nothing. Alan Bean.
Yeah. And Alan Bean's an interesting guy. He went on to post moon landing. He went on to be this painter, which is super interesting. Like I say interesting way too much. I got to find another descriptor, but he became quite a good painter. And so that it's kind of like his mantra and his philosophy of life. He just sees beauty kind of everywhere as a painter, and he is not shy. I found multiple quotes where he talks about the earth as being Garden of Eden. I mean, I think this seems more synchronistic. Like, I don't see a conspiratorial element here. I don't think someone's like, it's like, you need to talk about the Garden of Eden because you're the guy with the magic beans that grew this beanstalk. And I think it's just the universe lining things up. When I talk about this stuff, at some point, I'm going to have to talk about what is the unus mundus, what is people, what is potentially projection. you know, this seems to be something more of the orchestration of the universe or God. So these were my big takes from here. And also through the whole Alice in Wonder thing, the off with her head, we get another reference to the white rabbit. It's not as tight as the other ones, but I think it's pretty good because that's how you take your head off. You put it on the block.
And that's fascinating. I really like this guy's idea to. I mean, it's so simple and it's like very practical as well. Like just look around and you'll find yourself in the Garden of Eden. You know?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. By comparison to the moon, certainly, right? Like Buzz Aldrin said, it's like magnificent desolation or whatever. So, by comparison to the moon, yeah, Earth does seem like the Garden of Eden. But I mean, technically, in the Garden of Eden, there was no death, there was no decay, right? And that's clearly a part of life on Earth. So,
Hmm.
you know, it depends kind of what you're comparing it to.
I'm not sure if this is the right moment when I give my opinion about the uh, 63 event, like what happened.
Well, yeah, that's fine. Whatever. I've said so much crazy stuff today. I mean, I think it's I think we live in a dream it's like I kind of think we're in layered simulations. So I view one layer is like theater, and then a layer beyond that is like collective dream. So like Truman Show within the Matrix. That's kind of how I see reality.
Hmm.
So you can draw your conclusions about what I think happened on 11/22.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was talking about uh, a kind of a disclosure that happened in Full Metal Jacket. I was very shocked when I realized that. So what happened was in the
Suppository.
suppository. Yeah, that's suppository as well. And they actually bring attention to that thing. I mean,
Yeah.
people know about it, but it's like they explicitly bring that attention to it, and it's the way he says it, the sergeant, he's saying it as fact, but you kind of think like, well, maybe he could not have done three shots on a moving target. That seems to be very unlikely. But it's like he's stating it as a very fact. And suppose some I think some people would had their gears turning, like that's pretty strange. And then what happens later on in the bathroom scene, what happens to Pyle is pretty different. I mean, have you heard about a jelly donut thing?
Oh yeah, ich bin ein
Yeah.
Berliner or whatever,
I mean,
right? Like Kennedy thought he was saying, yeah, he thought he was saying I am a Berliner, and it really was saying I am a jelly donut, and then Pyle
yeah,
eats
yeah,
the jelly donut. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. That it's pretty strange. I
consumes
think,
it,
yeah, yeah. It's
and
like,
he's the sharpshooter. Yeah,
yeah. And then, I mean, there's all these ideas that are being thrown at us related to the assassination, and then the private is named Lawrence, And have you heard about that guy who was Mark Lawrence, who was hiding in the sewers? Do you know about this theory that
No, no. Tell me
like
what you're
Kennedy?
saying.
They talk about that a theory is that Kennedy was shot from the front from the drain. Someone was the car
Ah,
slowed down
yes.
and someone shot them from the drain, and that guy's name
Yeah.
Mark Lawrence, and
Ah.
Lawrence is a marksman, and he shot from the drain. He was in a world of shit when he shot Kennedy, and
Ooh, yeah.
Lawrence
There you
is in a
go.
world of shit when he shot himself. And then it's the reason that they talk about this theory is that if the bullet came from the back, it would have exited somewhere else. But if the bullet came from front, then the head would explode backwards. That's what they say. Say that is the reason why the bullet would have come from the front and the head would have exploded in that way. And then there's people talk about the autopsies that if the bullet entered from the right side or the left side, and in if you see when Private Pyle shoots himself, you'll see
Mm.
him the gun would be pointing in one direction and the head splatter would be the special effects head splatter would be in another direction. So that's a very strange inconsistency, because like Kubrick was very methodical with that scene. I mean, even Matthew Modine talks about it, that he was prepared for this scene for 6 weeks to get this right, and then that stupid mistake, why would he allow that in the final cut? But it's there, and it's there to unsettle us to some extent. That is what I concluded after watching the movie, and like knowing about all these theories going around. I think Kubrick thought that he was shot from the drain, and that drain guy, he was caught next day, and he was not from the town itself. He just came in, and he was in special forces for a while. I think you know about the story. I'm not sure if you know about the whole story, like why how this
I
guy
don't know
was
the
caught.
whole story.
I mean, he was a
Well,
suspect, but he was not interrogated. Like people suspected him to be the guy who did it, that from the drain, because he was not from that town and he was working at a car wash. Suddenly in the morning, he's very disheveled and like sweating and dirty all over. And people are asking him, "Why are you so dirty?" And people suspected him, but then they did not investigate further. And then, a lot of things happened. Like Joe Tibet guy he got shot, and he was like supposedly a lookalike for Kennedy. And then people said that their
yep.
bodies were swapped. It's a
Tippett.
whole thing that
JD Tippett.
yeah, that's a whole
Yeah,
thing
see, I
that's
mean,
happening.
you start digging into it. I mean, look, the Zapruder footage was clearly
Yeah.
edited and like, I don't know. You know, it happened on TV. That's what I know.
Yeah. It
That's
happened on
that's
TV.
what I know. It happened on TV. Oh, so as you were talking, something that dawned on me, there might be a way to put, you know, we might be getting a little story here, and this might be kind of like from the Unus Mundus. Um, maybe we're being given a story about the loss of innocence. You know, and you asked me to kind of clarify or the Garden of Eden story, and we do have seemingly some elements about the Garden of Eden in Genesis mixed up with the Apollo missions, and then we have this assassination kind of here seemingly referenced in Apollo 12. Perhaps that's about being cast out of the garden. Perhaps that's about, the loss of innocence. And a lot of people do feel like they lost their innocence. It's baby boomers in particular. I'm not I'm not that old. I was not there. I was not alive then. It's 17 years before I was born. So, you know, when I found out about this as a child, it was already like ancient history. It's probably like what like someone who was born in like, you know, 2015 thinks about 9/11. They're like, "Wait, what was that about?" Like that was like a million years ago. Um, but I wonder. And it's also, Bean's comments about like, "Oh, the earth is the garden of Eden." I wonder if that's that it's clearly not the right perspective in terms of theologically what the earth is. So, and to employ those terms. So now I'm kind of seeing it as a larger narrative here about the loss of innocence. But this alone is probably not strong enough. Just the fact that there's Eva there. It's interesting that there's two of them too. which could be potentially a reference to there's some Gnostic texts that talk about there being, before Eve there was Lilith, that Adam actually had two wives, so maybe that's relevant.
Like, what would you make out of these things called surveyors, and like how would they fit in?
I didn't get a chance to go into that. The scientifically speaking, I believe these were, I guess, maybe we call them probes or something that they sent in advance. I forget when they were done. I should know this better. But in the earlier, I think they did these earlier in the Gemini or early in the Apollo missions. They sent these up there so they could find a place to land, right? One-Eyed Jacks, Rich, who, like I said, really animated my curiosity about all these stuff. He would say that the surveyor thing is a nod to flat Earth, because if you just use surveyor equipment, their equipment, from what I understand, I'm not a surveyor, okay, but from what I understand, their equipment does not pick up on the curvature of the Earth. So it, in a way, offers a refutation to all of this. That's what he would say, but I haven't thought any deeper about it than that.
I mean, it's an interesting idea. It's a good place to look at for, like, I
Yeah,
wouldn't say that you're making things up. It's a good place to look because it's a special event and they're gonna like follow some sort of trajectory one way or the other. And I
yeah,
mean, I'm trying it back to The Shining, like it's the footsteps of Danny on the moon, and you're
yeah.
following the footsteps. So yeah, trajectory, that's important.
The middle crescent thing is super interesting too. I think that could be really worthwhile to dig further into. I mean, it makes me think about, don't they like talk about like civilization beginning in like the Fertile Crescent or something like that? So maybe that could be another reference to the Garden of Eden.
Oh yeah,
Is
that's
that,
interesting.
let's see here, Fertile Crescent, Garden of Eden? Yeah, what is that? The Fertile Crescent is a region in the Middle East traditionally associated with the location of the biblical Garden of Eden because it contains the Tigris and Euphrates rivers mentioned in Genesis. That feels kind of right to me, but I have to think about it a little bit more. Like, why is it middle? I mean, when I think middle, I think something like purgatory, which, to be honest, that feels a lot closer to what we live in than the Garden of Eden.
You talked about the loss of innocence. Um,
Mm,
I mean, we talked about the tree of life in Oppenheimer during the time we were talking about Oppenheimer and
yeah.
things like that. So we talked about that. The I'm talking about the movie. So there's 322 symbolism everywhere in that movie. If you have seen,
Yep.
even the runtime of the movie is 3 hours
Yep.
and 2 minutes and 22 seconds or something like that. So when you read that, I think Genesis 322. So dug that up and read. So I think it's about banishing people and from the Garden of Eden and like giving them the power to know what is truth and what is lie. I think this is what 322 says. I'll have to look it up.
Is this the one about? Is that the one about like eating and you'll be as gods, right? Isn't that what it is?
I'll have to confirm it. I should not be quoting it offhand. I'm going to look for it.
It's fine. It's fine. This is a workshop. It's fine. And the Lord God said,
Yeah,
Behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that is what I thought about the loss of innocence. This the way you're saying it, because if you're losing our innocence, we are now in control of discerning whether something is a truth or whether something is a lie. We are now responsible for ourselves. We have to decide. I'm just riffing upon what you're saying about the loss of innocence. Maybe you mean it in some other terms. I'm thinking about growing into
No, I
adulthood.
know. You're good. You're good. I think it's great. I do think we should progress a little bit because, gosh, we're gonna get to this is gonna be 3 hours long. So, um, or I could save my Hegel stuff for next time. Why don't we do that? Let's close out with the Apollo stuff, and I'll start with the Hegel stuff next time. I'll start it first.
Yeah. That's
Okay?
a good idea.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to 429. Okay. So Gus Grissom is a profoundly interesting character in this whole story. He was part of the trio that lost their lives during the Apollo 1 fire. I believe he was also with Ed White and Roger Chaffee. So I find this man to be so endlessly fascinating. His real name is Virgil, which gets lost in all of this. And I mean, how about that, right? Like that the man who is associated with our space program, going on a journey of self, is named after someone from the Aeneid, right? Not to mention he's also like the psychopomp in Dante's Inferno, right? And he dies in an Inferno. So this gets into the whole compulsion of the name thing. That is massive. That is absolutely massive. But that aside, one of the things that I think is getting a lot more attention now, like I remember in the past, like looking for this image was like really difficult, but like now it's pretty easy to find on Google. So there's like renewed interest in this. 5 days before the Apollo 1 fire, Gus Grissom was deeply dissatisfied with the Apollo program. He's like, no way this is going to work. Like they were having communication problems, all sorts of problems with the capsule or whatever. And to protest his dissatisfaction, he ripped a lemon off his lemon tree in his backyard and put it on a hanger and put it on the Apollo 1 simulator and held like an impromptu press conference and said like he voiced his frustrations. And then 5 days later, his capsule caught on fire and the whole crew died. And a lot of people suspect foul play. I don't know. I, again, I'm going back to my whole take of we live in nested illusions. But what is interesting about this in a lot of different ways, the Apollo 1 fire happens on January 27th. And I've wondered if this is another way to get one of these white rabbits into the mix, because that is Lewis Carroll's birthday, January 27th, which I find to be really intriguing, given everything else we've established about white rabbits, about the role of Alice in Wonderland, and all of this. And there's more I want to share about this, and I think the lemon, potentially connects to this Garden of Eden story, right? These fruits that are on these different trees. In addition to that, the fact that there was a like a burnt, I don't want to say it like this, like because I don't want to be disrespectful, but like it's almost like we're talking about the space program to this Greek god. It's almost like there was a sacrifice. They made this great sacrifice, but looking at it from a different way, it's potentially like almost like a burnt offering. And I dug deeper into that, and I found this article, Jordan, if you can pull this up from 430. I have not read this article. I've only skimmed the abstract, but this looks profoundly interesting, and I'm going to get to it soon. But there does seem to be some evidence, according to this scholar Marcel Dedian, from his article Apollo Slaughterhouse, published in 1986, because most people don't think about human sacrifice in relation to Apollo. but apparently there are like pottery fragments and things like that that show human sacrifice. And I think it's worth contemplating this when we think about the events that happened during the Apollo missions. I mean, the Apollo fire was not the only accident that occurred. There were other Apollo astronauts who were not able. They even put like this fallen astronaut toy or this sculpture, the first artwork on the moon. It's a whole thing. It looks like it looks like the male bathroom sign, and it's a whole thing. So I thought that was interesting, part of this discovery. And the further discovery, Jordan, if you can go to slide 431. What I did not know is that in Greek mythology, the lemon, some translators of many Greek mythological stories understand the golden apple to be the lemon. And the reason why this is important is that there are some very significant mythological stories that are associated with golden apples. Let me see if I can pull up the ones. I mean, some of the most significant one, the Garden of the Hesperides and Heracles. I believe it's the golden apples were a wedding gift from Gaia, the earth, to Hera when she married Zeus. So this brings in like the Jupiter elements again. We have Atalanta's race. The huntress Atalanta refused to marry any man who could not beat her in a foot race. A suitor named Hippomenes, realizing he could not outrun her, asked the goddess Aphrodite for help. Aphrodite gave him 3 irresistible golden apples. And the apple of discord in the Trojan War, Eris, the goddess of strife and discord, was angered that she was not invited to the wedding of Peleus and Thetis. In retaliation, Eris tossed a golden apple into the wedding banquet with the inscription "for the fairest." And so this ended up precipitating the Trojan War. And to this day, citrus fruits, their technical name, the botanical term for citrus fruits with a thick, leathery rind and segmented, juicy flesh, is Hesperidium, which is a reference to the aforementioned the Garden of the Hesperides and Heracles. So not only that, the lemon is sometimes associated with the moon, like the wedges of the lemon kind of look like moon phases, and there's all this other stuff that's associated with moons and lemons. So I think the symbol, outside of Grissom saying, "Oh, this thing is a lemon," I think it's again bringing in some it from this transcendental archetypal realm. It's bringing it down, surpassing the Gus Grissom or interpenetrating or enlivening this whole Gus Grissom conspiracy. And was he killed? Was he not? There's a story here about perhaps the Garden of Eden or the Garden of Hesperides or however you pronounce it. So that's the only, I just thought that was crazy. I never heard of a lemon being a golden apple, but that certainly would bring all these stories into play, given how much we've seen these mythological stories affecting other aspects of the missions. So I just thought it was cool.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe we have
it
time
is.
to talk about, maybe we should talk about the young stuff and the Hegel stuff. We can talk about it pretty quick, I think. But unless Jordan's like, I got to go.
I'm good. Ostic, are you okay? We can also do it next week.
Do you want to talk
Uh,
about Hegel and
are
Jung?
you? Are you? And you're gonna be the one talking about Hegel and Jung. I'm saying that.
I can do it
Are
kind
you?
of quick. I can do it kind of quick.
No. Are you feeling the high or the momentum? Then you should go for it if you're feeling it.
Let's go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, does anybody want to say anything about lemons before we go there?
I mean, I don't understand why would he do that in the first place. Like, how is it a protest? Like, from a
Jordan,
point, like,
do you want to explain that to him?
Is it just like lemons as a car?
Yeah,
Yeah.
explain it to Ostic. This is great because
Okay.
I forget that Ostic is not from our culture, so he doesn't understand certain things. So it's kind of fun. You tell him.
Oh, okay. Sometimes I overthink things too. I'm like, so if the most frequent context that someone would call something a lemon would be with a car. So like if you bought a car that looks good, you drive it away, you have the keys, and then you find out the engine's not working, like all these problems with it, then you'd call it a lemon because I guess intuitively a lemon looks like super juicy, super fruity, but then you bite into it and it's super sour.
Yeah. So it's like you're like the car looked great, but you drove it off the lot and it was a lemon. It was
Oh,
yeah.
that makes sense.
Gosh,
That
how do
makes
we?
sense.
Yeah, we just inherited it.
I have to look up where that originated, like so many
It's from
things.
it's like from a Volkswagen commercial from like the 1960s. A famous Volkswagen ad in the 1960s, part of the Think Small campaign, featured a picture of a car with the caption "Lemon" to highlight the company's rigorous quality control. The ad is often cited as popularizing the term, but it had to be around before that. Here, I'm gonna.
Presumably, but I don't know.
I mean, if it's
Since
a
1906, this is
Volkswagen, if it's a
yeah,
Volkswagen, then it could be a Beetle, the yellow Beetle
yeah,
that
It's true
Jack
too.
drives in.
yeah, yeah. Ooh, oh my gosh, yes.
That's really good.
Here from Wikipedia. Since 1906, to hand someone a lemon in British slang meant to pass off a substandard article as a good one. In 1909, American English slang use of lemon represented a worthless thing, disappointment, booby prize. Its first attribution to mean a problematic car was in a Volkswagen advertisement created by Julian Koenig and Helmut Krohn as part of an advertisement campaign managed by William Birnbach. Yes. So that's right. It's the yellow beetle. Oh my gosh.
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can watch the ad. I don't know.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
it's
sure he
not
finds it.
exactly a Beetle. It's a. Is it a Beetle?
That's what they
In the
called him.
1960s.
The right
That's
one.
the one on the right, that's a newer car. That's like an electric,
Oh, okay.
um,
Right, 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 right.
They had it with
trying
a
to
beetle
find.
though. Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at. Is that a beetle?
I mean, this is the
Oh
bug.
my god. Wait, why is there uh um why am I looking at the Apollo lander in this, Jordan? Where are you?
I'm on a web page that I think is like a marketing case study.
Luke
Can
is.
you share that link so I can look at it real quick? Put it in the
Yeah.
chat. Oh
Yeah.
my god. Maybe they're referencing this what Gus did here.
That one says it's ugly, but it gets you there.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
They did a campaign
Let's see if
with
there's
the
more.
Apollo lander?
That's what it looks like.
Are you kidding me? No way.
I don't think there's more about this on this page, but
Oh my gosh.
I know.
I mean, that would mean they had to have done it after Gus did it. That would be bad PR.
Let's see.
I feel like I'm hallucinating.
Check this out.
Oh my God. When was that published? 1969. Why? What's it? What? Can you read the small print there? I can't see it.
Yeah, it says following the remarkable accomplishments of the crew of the Apollo 11, this ad appeared in most newspapers across the country. The response, especially among Volkswagen owners, was overwhelming. In appreciation of your appreciation, and also because there have been so many requests, we're offering poster-size reprints of this now famous ad to anyone who would like one. Blah, blah, blah. After all,
It's
beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
it's a gold bug. It's a golden beetle.
Mhm.
Oh my God.
How strange.
This is the biggest discovery I think we've ever made on a stream.
Live. Let's see, and then in life this is less impressive, but, you know.
They had the
Yeah, and then for the 50th anniversary this might be paywall. This
Why
is
is that?
paywall.
Why is this a we kill over the bug? What is it? Kill the bug? Is it written?
Will we ever kill the bug?
Uh,
And they call those cars bugs, like
yeah.
beetles.
All right. And for anyone who's watched this, I don't know if anybody's watching any of this, but like, right, the gold beetle is significant for so many different reasons because it connects to Jung's work on synchronicity and establishing synchronicity as reality for his patient because he found a gold bug that she dreamed about while they were having the session.
Yeah.
Also, the gold bug in The Shining, the gold bug in Poe's works, the swapping out of the red bug for the gold bug in The Shining.
Mhm.
That's crazy. I mean, I don't know why anyone didn't think about the PR. I mean, it was 8 years earlier. I guess it was just buried. Not too many people knew about Gus putting a lemon on the lander, and then they're going to analogize it as a lemon. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
And then they kept doing it. Like, this is a 2019 ad to celebrate the 50th anniversary.
This is so alchemical.
Mhm.
Like, why would you make them yellow?
Mhm. Yep.
All right. All right. This feels like a Unus Mundus move.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like conspiracy with this.
I mean, Volkswagen itself has such a varied history, rich history with fascism. The Because Hitler
Yeah.
was actually involved in like building up that car. He was very much
Yeah.
like he didn't care about other things. He was very personally involved with this car. It's pretty
Yeah.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. All right. That's a great find.
Keep going, but give me a mo okay, sorry.
Yeah.
There we go. My tabs were You wanna get into
Yeah, let's talk about this stuff real quick because otherwise, I mean, I've already got like 20 slides backed up, but I'm just going to read this collaborative piece of writing I did with ChatGPT to kind of, I really I like Osik holding me accountable to like develop this theory a little bit more each time. So we'll see what I have next week. But if we start with the image on the left, because what's going to be kind of important to think about as we go deeper into this understanding is perspective, right? Like we talk about like archetypes and the collective unconscious from the perspective of the individuals that participate in them and are manifestations of them. But then there's like kind of a dreamlike quality to the world itself. And then also how does God fit into all of this? You know, I oftentimes throw my hands up in the air and it's like this is God. This is God doing this. Even through the conspiracy stuff, that is God. That is God working because God is sovereign over all. It's like his reality. I don't know what Ostick thinks about God. But maybe you'll agree with that. Okay. So the three concentric frames, psychological, phenomenological, and panentheistic, represent successive ways of understanding the same process, the unfolding of consciousness as it encounters itself. In the psychological frame, the Apollo missions, conspiracy narratives, and alchemical symbolism all emerge from the archetypal life of the collective unconscious. They are projections of psychic energies of the human spirit striving toward transcendence, shadowed by doubt and deception. In the phenomenological frame, those same events are not merely mental constructs, but patterns arising within a single field of awareness. The world is psyche, dreaming itself through technological and mythic forms. At the widest scope, the panentheistic frame sees this total process as the divine mind expressing and discovering itself through human history. Even deception and conflict, the play of light and shadow, become instruments of revelation. From this view, the conspirator and the visionary, the skeptic and the believer, are all participants in the same alchemical unfolding. The question, who am I in all this, no longer demands separation but participation. I am a locus of reflection within the total mind, one point through which the cosmos becomes self-aware. The mystery then is not whether these events are true or false, but what truth is being disclosed through their very appearance. I am uncomfortable. So, going off my script, okay? These are ways that I am grappling with this information that I'm not incredibly comfortable with, okay? Because what I'm saying here sounds very anti-Christian as the way that Christianity is communicated amongst mainline believers, okay? This idea that somehow God is, we're not supposed to talk about God as being somehow identical with the world, even if not thoroughly interpenetrating it in the same, like he's not the world exactly, right? He is somehow sustaining it, which is, I don't necessarily find that to be heretical. That seems totally like all of creation can be sustained by God. And perhaps it is all mental for God. Was sustained in what? His mind. So it would make sense if we are like a reflection of God, right? That his mind is kind of built in the same way, and these archetypes and these play of light and shadow would come out. So that doesn't seem to be as problematic as the idea of God in us comprehending this divine play is necessary for God to make some sort of further disclosure about himself. And I think that's kind of where this is going. And I think we need to go deeper into his work on Answer to Job, because that's really the cash output of that text, right? Here's just a quote from it. God has need of man in order to become conscious of himself. Okay. And this, he had this great relationship with this priest named Victor White, and Jordan and we've watched some plays and documentaries on it or whatever. And this idea of Jung's really caused a breach there, because it really does. And if you read Answer to Job, it does set up in some respects God as being superior, or man being superior to God in some way. Okay. Like morally, because like Job is like in a way reminding God of the unethical things that he's doing. I don't know if I believe this, okay, but it is potentially powerful for the thesis that I'm developing here. So I'm a little bit conflicted. And if we want to go, Jordan, to slide 433, there is some need to potentially distinguish the phenomenological realm from the panentheistic. I think it's pretty clear the way that I read it off there. But yeah, there's like a higher consciousness with God outside of it that's understanding it. If we go to slide 434, there's not a lot that's been, from what I understand, there's not a lot that has been written on the subject, though I like last time I included some texts that I think are going to be important. This one Vladislav Salk, you can get this from the Young Institute. You can pay for it and listen to it. It's like a 3-hour long lecture, Dark Religion and Conspiracy Theories. Eric Neumann's The Origins and History of Consciousness. This looks very interesting. This is one I actually found out. I found that Apollo sacrifice article, Apollo slaughterhouse article via it. Jason D. Blatt's Apollo and Artemis, a reflection of the archetypal consciousness and space travel. Those, and maybe to a lesser extent, this vaccine hesitancy and conspiracy theories, a Jungian perspective by Kachuf and Saraga. But yeah, I wanted to get this in because I think it's Ostic kind of demanding it of me kind of holds me accountable, although I'm spiritually struggling with the assertion that I put out there. I do think if you read the Bible in certain ways, panentheism is fine. But this idea that God is becoming conscious through men, I'm not quite prepared to endorse that yet. But it does seem to match some of the evidence we're looking at here so far. So that's it. That's all I got for today.
I mean, that's a beautiful theory, first of all. I mean, the imagery, I think there's a lot of clarity in it. I mean, you don't even have to, if you're struggling with it, I don't think you should put it that way that God is experiencing himself through us. Yeah, you talked about like God acting through nature. I think that's a better way. You know, the cosmic mind, it's God
Yeah.
acting through it different ways. So I mean, if you struggle with that and if you think that it's being heretical, you should word it in that way because I think the outcome is the same. And that I think the English that you're using that's creating an artificial hierarchy there because I mean, it's not a cause and effect relationship. It's like
Yeah, totally. I mean, the thing is but I mean, when you just change it to acting, you strip it of teleology, right? So why is he acting the way he is? I mean, you may get around it by changing the vocabulary, but then you're making it so that God seems undirected and not intelligent and not purposeful. I'm not saying that's what you're
hmm,
saying. That's just my first response to that language change.
hmm. I mean, I just think it's beautifully explained. I think that's a good way to, compartmentalize that whole idea because we struggle with so many examples here and there. And that idea, because like at one level, conspiracies and all these symbolisms are being formed in our psyches, and then at the second level, we are experiencing them as tangible realities and patterns that we pick
Yes.
out. That's
Yeah.
a good way to put it. That's it's a non-crazy way to put it. I think, yeah, it looks
Well,
good.
and this, this is the thing is that one of the benefits that idea has, right? If God is operating through the individuals in this way, that God is the one who's also seeding the inconsistencies in this historical narrative so that people like us will see them and make the progression to the higher reality that's behind them all. So, like,
Hmm.
God is both planting and exposing the conspiracies, but then that would mean that people would be like, wait, are you saying that God is responsible for all the evil in the world? Well, if you this gets into a question of like, who is Satan, who is Lucifer, like, what was the serpent in the garden, who is the author of good and evil? Is God big enough in our mind to be the author of it all? Is that a heretical thing to say?
I don't. So I don't. I never think about this.
Yeah.
So Jordan may be better person to weigh in.
Oh, I would just say I'm not very attached to what someone else would say is heretical. I think everybody in this conversation is sincerely pursuing the truth. and it is revealed to us in layers as we are capable of processing it. And what I find to be true today is going to be different than what I find to be true in a few weeks. And I think the idea of heresy can be a tool to keep us from being curious.
In support of what I just said, there from Isaiah 45:7, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. I mean, that's pretty
I mean,
heavy when you think about it.
Well, but like what it's hard to get outside of our human perspective too. And at different levels of consciousness, at different dimensions. I mean, if you are God all encompassing, I don't think there's the same sense of like good and bad necessarily. Like, I think I don't know, I'm not God. But
Yeah.
but I would just, do you get what I'm saying? It's like from our vantage point, like a better way of articulating this is the outer planets are thoughts to be like more societally impactful. They're kind of shaping like the bigger reality. The inner planets are more personally relevant. But either way, a planet having, and I'm just like speaking into these terms, I'm not super attached to them, but like a planet having influence on you is not like quote good or quote bad, but subjectively to the person in the experience, it is going to feel good or bad. But if I don't know, it's like, are we in this massive purification process? Is that what is happening to us? Which I think you've kind of alluded to a little bit, Luke, in prior conversations. Like, are we going through this alchemical distillation where these different things are helping us to come to a different stage of spiritual development? And from that vantage point, like objectively, it seems kind of positive, if you want to use that word, but subjectively, like things can really suck.
Yeah.
I don't know. We could talk about this for hours. Like, this is not
Well,
settled stuff.
yeah.
This is
Yeah.
like
you guys,
big.
you guys should do an episode with a Christian. I think there was some theologist. Yeah, those people.
I, I think that's me.
I mean, yeah, that's you. I mean, you should be able to convince other people. If you're feeling this idea that you might be attacked as, as some sort of an doing a heresy, I'm just saying that would be a better
Well,
platform.
here's what I know. I know even when I uh, did when I was talking to Christians about biblical literacy in regards to the creation narrative, I was called a heretic then. So I'm not really sure how productive it is to deal with normie Christians, because if they what for them is heresy is going to be what the consensus is. It's not. That taught me that, when I was telling people, hey, Genesis 1, it's real and it's on the very first page of the Bible, and they go, you're a divisive heretic. And I'm just like, I'm telling you the Bible's real. And they're like, not like you say it is. And I think at that point I was just kind of like, this is impossible. This isn't going to work.
No, no, I'm
This,
not talking about normie Christians. I'm
yeah,
talking about the people you have on your podcast. I mean, those ones. I mean, that lady you
maybe.
had and Heidi. I think she's also into Christianity. Jordan, she already knows all these things. I mean, I'm in the dark here. I'm saying you should not be taking my opinion about these things.
How,
Just saying.
yeah. Do you, well, I probably shouldn't ask you. I probably shouldn't ask you your person. Like, I'm just curious how you identify religiously. I don't even know.
I'm a Hindu.
Yeah,
Yeah, just that. I don't
that's
have
cool.
very deep beliefs. I just like the culture. I'm born
I mean,
into it. Yeah.
that's what I figured. And so, but I have to say, I, I, I love dialoguing with you about all this stuff, because like even the whole lemon conversation, like the fact that you had to ask us about that, look what it led to, right? And a variety of other things, right? So it's really been invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, all those mistakes somehow pay off
Yeah,
some way
not a
or the other.
mistake. Not a mistake. Divinely
Yeah.
aligned plan, my friend. All right, why don't we bring this one to a close? I gotta. It's 7 o'clock. Hopefully, when I turn this off, the Commanders have mounted a tremendous comeback, and it's gonna be happy times. Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
I don't even know.
Sports
I'm
are
just
okay. You should play sports.
Yeah, I'm going to. All right, see you later, guys.
bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.